Chapter 1503. Illidan was not executed? Death is not the harshest punishment for an evil person. And we need to be clear, who is our real enemy? Who is the evil enemy that forced us to leave our homeland and wander the universe for 25,000 years? In the magic mirror, the Draenei saw the translucent Valen bathed in golden holy light, guiding them as usual. Countless Draenei wept bitterly, thanking the mirror image's direction. A new era has arrived. It's rare for us to meet a powerful organization that has the same beliefs as us and is willing to protect us. The Alliance. We should cherish this opportunity, recuperate, and advance hand in hand with the Alliance. Valen's position in the hearts of the Draenei was unparalleled. The reputation he had accumulated for 30,000 years was not something a new leader like Imriel could compare to. The problem was Valen was dead, and he could not come out of the soul casket for 24 hours, because it would be an unnecessary burden on his soul. If he could not suppress the resentful souls, Valen's soul might be destroyed as well. This special situation made it impossible for Valen to continue as the leader of the Draenei. It was because of this awkward situation that Imriel's ascension to the throne was inevitable. In addition to Valen's support for his disciple, it could be said that unless Imriel caused trouble with the Alliance, her position as leader was as stable as a mountain. In Theramore's newly built soul tower, Imriel knelt on a cushion-like object in front of the soul casket. In front of her was Valen's kind figure. "Teacher, I am troubled. Please speak. Teaching and answering questions is a teacher's duty. I was busy with the survival of the race and neglected to teach you. Now is not the worst, at least I have more time to teach you and the other Karabear apprentices." Imriel looked at the exquisite soul casket that looked like a carved box. "What I said to you, will His Excellency Orgrim hear it? He can't hear what I don't want him to hear. This is my pride." When it came to how to use soul power, Eridar was the one who was the best. "It's about the Alliance's throne meeting." Imriel fidgeted anxiously with her fingers. She may be a leader now, but in front of Valen, she would always be a student who never grew up. "What? Does the Alliance have policies that are not beneficial to the Draenei?" "No, it's not. However, Merritt told me that since this was an alliance of many countries and races, the Draenei needed to find strong allies in order to increase their authority within the Alliance. But no matter how hard I try, I can't make any progress." Imriel began to count with his fingers. "Dwarves and gnomes don't care about the way of the holy light. After I explained that we had lost those high-tech legacies, they only cared about the quality and quantity of our holy water." The Night Elves. It seems that Illidan, who I wanted to kill before, was the childhood friend of High Priestess Tyrande. Tyrande might hate me a little now, so she's doing everything according to the rules. But the settlement that the Alliance assigned to us, the Draenei, is near Darnassus. On the human side, His Majesty Varian Rin was lukewarm towards my visit. He then said that the Stormwind Kingdom was not responsible for the affairs of the Draenei, and refused to further communicate with me about religion and military affairs. Then there's the problem. The three Windrunner sisters of the Blood Elves, Queen Menethil of Lordaeron, Queen Berev of Alterac, and Queen Proudmoore of Kull, Tiras seem to have formed an invisible alliance that I can't see, but I can feel, and they are collectively alienating the Draenei. Although they don't seem to treat the Draenei well, I feel that they are more enthusiastic about the tribe than the Draenei. This is not a good feeling. After that, Imriel continued to talk about what she had seen and heard after joining the Alliance. When Imriel finished, even Valen couldn't help but ponder. The experienced Valen, of course, immediately realized that the Draenei were being subtly resisted. And everything started from Imriel's request to execute Illidan, according to the wishes of the Draenei people. It didn't feel like this was the intention of Duque or Tyrande, but the resistance was real. From the current situation, it could be judged that the Alliance had the most financial resources. The Marcus family directly under Duque, the Sea Kingdom of Kull Tiras, and the Trade Alliance Alterac. There was also Lordaeron, which had better grain production. The Marcus family had already done their best to support this outland expedition. The only ones who could take care of the migration of the Draenei were the remaining three families. They had spare power, but they didn't do anything. This was definitely a big problem for the Draenei. Even if the Draenei didn't collapse immediately, They couldn't stay any longer. After defeating Illidan and his forces, Thrall had rescued his fellow orcs, so it was inevitable that the army would retreat. The remaining Draenei would definitely not be able to withstand the next attack of the Burning Legion. Other than Azeroth, which had the anti-Titan planet magic circle, the Draenei had nowhere else to go. If they were to encounter the resistance of the countries within the alliance, it would be really bad. My child, have you noticed that the leaders of the countries and forces that are resisting you have one thing in common? Imriel suddenly realized. They are all women? Yes, it's very likely that they have a good relationship with each other. They are best friends or sisters. I suggest that you find them and sincerely apologize. Not only do you give up on pursuing Illidan, but don't mention anything about Vashj. These two did cause great suffering to the Draenei in the past, but now they are within the alliance. Imriel nodded. In the next few days, Imriel eagerly followed Valen's instructions and went to visit. Unfortunately, it was still of no use. There was no sarcasm, but there were still soft nails sent to the Draenei girls. Imriel originally wanted to find Duque. However, Duque encountered a more critical problem. The Dark Portal, year 24, 2nd of June, Duque received a floating bottle in Karazhan. It was very interesting. This bottle actually followed the flow of the elements in the space-time rift, entered the only gap that Duque had deliberately left, and floated into Karazhan. That was the place where the Virgin Maiden was guarding. Duque used the magician's hand to open the bottle, and suddenly a paragraph of text popped out of the bottle. It formed a line of words in the common language in the void. 10th of May, Isle of Quel'Dana's Morningstar Village. Duque couldn't help but smile. You're finally here. Chapter 1504. The Isle of Quel'Dana's, where the Sunwell was located, was once an important place for the High Elves, but now it seemed rather bleak. This could not be helped. After the fall of the Sunstrider royal family and the Silvermoon Council, which represented the supremacy of magic, the Rangers were now in power. Whether it was Sylvanas who was the queen, the other three Windrunner sisters, Lor'themar or Hadron, they were all Rangers. Although the Rangers did not go as far as to suppress the mages, it was impossible for them to be like the era of Cuel Salis, where mages were respected and all resources were given to mages. The result was that all the factions were happy, and only the mages were resentful. But what could they do? It was difficult to find a radiant moon in the country, let alone a breaking dawn. When the Allies achieved complete victory in the Outer Lands and the news that Prince Kael had advanced to the Breaking Dawn rank, the mages in Sindorii rejoiced and demanded the prince's return. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that anyone could return, but not the Sunstrider royal family. Otherwise, where would they put Queen Sylvanas? Kael, that could be considered reasonable and publicly stated. I am guilty. If a felony like betraying the country could be easily forgiven, then anyone could commit treason. If the country needs me, I will rush back to help in the war, but I will never return to Sindorii. This has nothing to do with Her Majesty the Windrunner. It is purely my personal atonement. Instead of returning, Kael chose to enter the Dalajan Kirin Tor Parliament again. With the support of Duque and Jaina, he was unanimously elected as the chairman. Duque and Jaina, as well as the still missing Ronan, were nominal members to maintain their influence in the Dalajan. Apart from the mages in Sindorii who were disappointed, it could be said that this was the best outcome for everyone. On the 10th of May, a mysterious figure appeared unexpectedly. His appearance, his attire, and his staff that could not be more typical had evoked the dusty memories of many mages. After some hesitation, countless mages who were supposed to be on duty knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, 1-2-10-100. When the entire Sunwell garrison team knelt before the mysterious man, he opened his arms, a pair of withered arms that had lost all moisture. When his hood was blown off by the wind, a wrinkled face was revealed, as well as a pair of soul flames that came from the netherworld that replaced his eyes. That's right. He was the former Sun King, Anastrian Sunstrider. My subjects, I, Anastrian, have returned. The Sun King roared into the sky. What responded to him was a tsunami of cheers. Long live our king. After appeasing the Blood Elves, no, the High Elves, who had pledged their loyalty to him again, the Sun King came to a secret chamber, and bowed to the two mysterious men who were wrapped in cloaks. "My lords, do you see that? My subjects are still loyal. The Sunwell is still under my control. Now will the army accept my conditions?" Ha ha ha. It was a crisp and charming laugh. If the Sun King was not a forgotten person like a salted fish, perhaps even if he was still an old man thousands of years old, his heart would still be moved. The two mysterious men took off their hoods. They were the Eridar twins. The high-grade warlock Elises smiled charmingly. "Sir Kil'jaeden will not forget your contributions," Queen Saloras continued. "He will never be stingy with rewards for those who are loyal to the army. As long as Sir Kil'jaeden successfully descends with the power of the Sunwell, he can promise on behalf of the army that Azeroth will not be completely destroyed. After getting what the army wants, you will be the king of Azeroth. If there are no problems, then let's sign this soul contract in triplicate. One for you, one for us to take back to the Twisting Nether for archiving, and one for Sir Kil'jaeden. Sign it, and you will be a member of the glorious Burning Legion. Sir Kil'jaeden promises to give you the treatment of a mid-tier Void Lord." The Gemini's voice was full of temptation. Most importantly, it was still the will of the Sun King. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and signed it. A few big, flamboyant words were left on the 3 soul contracts, which also symbolized the fall of his soul. He could clearly feel that as he signed his name, a part of his soul was forcibly separated and flew to the distant void, becoming Kil'jaeden's biggest bargaining chip to control him. This was the price. Anastrian's betrayal was both accidental and inevitable. It was very different from the Forsaken in history. Originally, Queen Sylvanas was the leader in history, and she even turned Lordaeron into the Undercity. In the entire Lordaeron continent, apart from Gilneas and the Eagle Nest Mountain, there were no standard alliance countries. Because of Google's instigation and the escalation of various conflicts, the Alliance and the Horde worked together more because of the situation, and not as closely as they were in this life. In the continuous local and large-scale conflicts, the Forsaken, who were originally at odds with the Alliance, were able to kill a large number of humans and obtain soldiers to replenish their numbers. The Forsaken in this life were miserable. After the Sun King refused to accept the control of the Lich King, and became independent, Lordaeron was quickly destroyed by the Alliance army gathered by Duque. The Undercity was destroyed before it was officially established. It was chased across the sea miserably, and hid in Winterspring. Winterspring was not a good place either. There were a large number of blue Dragonians there, as well as the 2-headed Chimeras, who were all extremely ferocious fellows. It was not easy for them to seek refuge with the Horde, and they originally wanted to use the banner of the Horde to check and balance the Alliance. Who knew that under Duque's suppression, the Horde was basically in existence like a lackey, and Sal saw him and his Silvermoon Council as more of a thug. The most annoying thing was that the resurrected Orgrim, who he used as a stepping stone to seek refuge with the Horde, was basically a mountain of his own among the Forsaken. He pulled away all the Death Knights and warriors of Orc origin, and they were more closely united around the Orcs instead of listening to him, the King of the Forsaken. The Horde signed an alliance with the Alliance, and the Forsaken could not find soldiers to replenish themselves. The corpses of the Alliance soldiers could not be converted, and no one in the tribe except for the Orcs cared about him, the Sun King. Even if the Orcs became Death Knights or warriors, they still did not listen to him. In fact, the entire Forsaken tribe was really driven to a dead end. After fighting Silithus, they fought the Outland. Apart from getting a bunch of equipment that was not too superb, the loss of manpower was the most painful thing for the Sun King. The Silvermoon Council, which had been a Forsaken with him, was now only a name, and there were only 2 or 3 of them left. If the proud Sun King wanted to regain his strength and become an overlord, he really could not think of a good way. In desperation, he thought of the Burning Legion. Chapter 1505. Power was one of the sweetest poisons in the world. Once you got used to the feeling of being in control of the country, you would no longer consider giving up. Having been at the peak of power for thousands of years, the taste of power had long been imprinted in the deepest part of Anastrian's soul. In order to retain power, he could rely on Arthas, who seemed stronger at the time, and the Lich King Nazul behind him, When he realized that he was not used to being a servant and being treated as a slave, the stubbornness in his soul immediately flared up. Thus, during the third battle at the Dark Portal, he easily betrayed the Lich King. After joining the tribe, when his subordinates were killed again and again, and his strength was constantly reduced, he could not bear it anymore. Thus, in the Outland, he secretly found a way to contact Kill Jaden from a captured demon. Even after relying on the Burning Legion, he was still very careful. The Legion was not invincible. The tragedy of the ancient war and the Archeron's bones had repeatedly proven this. In the deal with the Eredar twins, he repeatedly emphasized that only when Kill Jaden completely descended to Azeroth would he raise the flag of rebellion in the tribe and respond to the Burning Legion. Before that, he would still be the most loyal servant of the great chief Sal. The Eredar twins laughed coldly. This laughter made a Nastrian's hair stand on end. In his heart, this was the Legion's distrust of swaying people who wanted to gain benefits from both sides. Recently, the Legion has rarely been able to enter the core of the Alliance and the Horde to obtain the latest and most detailed information. If I stay in the tribe, it will be beneficial for Sir Kill Jaden to descend. Aless laughed. Haha, let's put it that way for now. Salola said with a smile. No matter what, your contribution will not be small. The Eredar twins disappeared. The ones who were here before were only their soul projections. Feeling lost, the Sun King slowly walked out of the secret chamber and looked up at the palace that once belonged to him. The beams painted bright red, the brilliant ceiling made of marble and inlaid with gold leaf. The magic stone chandelier connected to the well of the sun that was always lit. The images went from blurry to clear until every detail was reflected in the eyes constructed by the fire of the soul. It's mine. It's all mine. It belongs to me. I want them all back. The Sun King opened his arms and let out a roar that shook half of the palace. The mages loyal to him knelt on the ground and chanted the holy name of the Sunstrider. Soon, the Sun King came to a secret room that only he knew. As soon as he stepped into the room filled with cobwebs, the dusty floor lit up with mysterious magic runes. All of the runes formed a huge circular magic array that emitted a blazing red light. The light flickered as if it was welcoming the arrival of the true master of the Sunwell. Begin. The Sun King seemed to be talking to someone, but he also seemed to be talking to himself. After saying that, he began to chant an incantation. This was a secret valve that controlled the water in the Sunwell. Even Kale, Bats didn't know about this place, let alone the current queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas. He looked in the direction of Silvermoon City with extreme disgust. Even though he was looking at a pitch-black wall, he felt that his gaze had transcended space and landed on the usurper, nailing her to the throne that should have belonged to him. He, accompanied by the Sun King's cold laughter and the powerful energy of the Sunwell, more spatial holes appeared on the already slightly broken planet Azeroth's protective circle. These holes could not allow a Lord-level demon to pass through, but it was enough for the Eredar warlocks to complete their descent. Green teleportation doors opened in the palace corridors and halls of the Sunwell. Facing the Eredar demons that walked out of the teleportation doors, the High Elves were like their High Elves from 10,000 years ago. They knelt before these ugly and evil creatures that prided themselves on their nobility. Ha 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 ha. The Eredar warlocks began to cast spells, injecting evil energy into the bodies of these self-indulgent High Elves, rotting their souls and bodies. Every High Elf's body changed. A pair of black goat's horns grew out of their foreheads. Sharp, vampire-like canine teeth grew out. Their originally fair skin turned the color of wheat, and there were many evil runes on their skin. A pair of short black wings grew out of their shoulder blades, making them look a little out of place. There was also the green evil light that flowed from their wrists and ankles. They had turned from pure elves into a demon subspecies, Shadowblade elves. But they did not regret it, because they felt an unprecedented surge of magic flowing in their bodies. For a moment, fanatical laughter and praises came from every palace in the Sunwell Highlands. All right, I should go. I'll leave the rest to you. After the Sun King arranged everything, he turned around and opened a teleportation door to leave. Unfortunately, those who saw him off were not only his subordinates, but also Duque. In Karazhan, Duque hugged Sylvanas affectionately. Beside him lay Aurelia and Sasha. When they saw this scene, their bodies trembled in anger. Anastrian! You bastard! It's not enough to betray all of Quel'Dorii. You want to betray Sin'Dorii as well. If not for Duque holding her, Queen Sylvanas would have probably jumped up on the spot and killed her way to the Sun Well, stopping the escaping Sun King and beating him up first. Duque smiled, and there was a hint of nonchalance in his smile. The reason why conspiracies are scary is that before they start, everything is unknown. If it's a known conspiracy, then it's just a clown dancing in our palm. We can crush it easily. Aurelia was convinced. No wonder you've been sneaking into the Sunwell Highlands in all sorts of ways besides staying in Karazhan. So this is what you're up to. Sasha rubbed her eyebrows. You're amazing. There's even a live broadcast. Queen Sylvanas suddenly rejoiced. If not for Duque's precautions, once Kil'jaeden successfully descended, New Silvermoon would be the first to suffer. This brand new city built on the edge of the ruins of the old city had been restored to its former glory after 9 years with the full support of the Alliance, making it the new pride of Sin'Dorii. The Windrunner sisters did not want this new city to be destroyed. That would hurt the morale of the citizens. Chapter 1506. Queen Sylvanas kissed Duque, then said in a serious tone, "We're waiting for Kil'jaeden to descend halfway. Then we'll stop him. After dealing with Kil'jaeden, we'll go and kill Anastrian as well? He's already defected to the Burning Legion, so Thrall has no reason to protect him this time, right?" Duque smiled and shook his head. "We're not going to deal with Anastrian this time. The Forsaken mages are still useful to the Horde. Even if Thrall agrees to expel the Forsaken from the Horde, there's no point in him secretly protecting the bones. After all, we can't use the Holy Light to search every corner of Kalimdor." Sylvanas was indeed the Queen of Darkness who was very good at conspiracies. She immediately understood the crux of the matter. For example, even if Illidan committed all sorts of evil outside, as long as he did not directly harm his own country or people, there would be no absolute hatred and conflict of interest between the two sides. You want to keep Anastrian alive and let him find a chance to bite the Horde. Yes. It'll be difficult. You know, there are a few Dreadlords in the Forsaken faction who betrayed the Burning Legion. If things go wrong and Anastrian pushes the blame to his subordinates, then there's no way he'll be able to get rid of him. As long as he's still useful to the Horde, Thrall won't easily touch him. A confident smile appeared on Duke's face. "Don't worry, I have absolute evidence." A moment ago, a soul contract had been placed on the desk next to Duque's. The Sun King would never have dreamed that the Eridar Gemini were actually Duque's people. There was no such thing as a soul contract in triplicate. Kil'jaeden only cared about receiving a soul contract and controlling the Sun King's soul fragment. He didn't care about anything else. As long as he could control Anastrian, that was enough for him. He would never have thought that the Eridar twins, who were trembling in fear and looked like they were about to piss their pants, had already planned to betray him. They had even purposely left an extra soul contract, so that Duque could sell the Sun King for a good price in the future. If Kil'jaeden knew that the Eridar Gemini, who had been reduced to running errands and serving as cannon fodder, had long since sided with Duque, it was hard to imagine what kind of expression he would have. The 3 Windrunner sisters didn't know what Duque had mastered, but they had been Duque's women for a long time. As long as Duque said that he had a certain someone, then it was a sure thing. Duque didn't say anything, so they didn't ask. They just waited for the show to happen. "All right, now it's your turn." Duque gave Queen Sylvie a gentle hug. "I know." Queen Sylvie's eyes gradually became sharp. When it came to the fate and future of her compatriots, she transformed into a decisive Queen of Darkness. A moment later, all the Alliance leaders received an urgent encrypted message from Queen Sylvanas in Silverymoon City. "It's an emergency. As Commander Marcus predicted, the Burning Legion has set their sights on the Sun Well. A quarter of an hour ago, a large number of Eridar warlocks infiltrated the Sunwell Highlands and instigated the Sin'Dorii mages, who thirsted for power and power to rebel. Now they have all become half-elf, half-demon monsters." What appeared in the magic projection was the newly born Shadowblade elves. Hiss! All the leaders gasped. Magni let out a long sigh. "Duque, Your prediction was indeed correct. No wonder you started making arrangements half a year ago. The Burning Legion making use of the sun well to cause trouble wasn't some monstrous prophecy. It could be said that this was something that all wise commanders could predict. The only difference was when and how large the scale. There were only two ways for the Burning Legion to invade Azeroth on a large scale. One was to forcefully kill the greatly strengthened Pentashade dragons in the Void battlefield against the powerful planet's anti-Titan magic formation. The other was to find a way to borrow the powerful energy of Azeroth to forcefully tear apart the protective magic formation and allow the commander-level demons to descend. The Burning Legion had spent more than 10,000 years proving that the first method wouldn't work. As long as 3 or more of the Pentashade dragons were still alive, they couldn't even think about it. The second method was to use the Well of Eternity during the ancient war 10,000 years ago. Back then, the Well of Eternity was so powerful that it almost transported Sargeras in his complete form over. In the 15 years at the Dark Portal, the Dalajan, who had gathered a large amount of magic, had played this role. Unfortunately, the Dalajan didn't have a large source of magic. After using up the magic that had been accumulated for thousands of years, the Dalajan didn't have enough magic for Kill Jaden to descend. Therefore, there were only two choices left. Either the Dark Portal or the new Well of the Sun. Compared to the Dark Portal, which was heavily guarded by the Alliance, the Well of the Sun, which had been put on hold and banned due to the loss of power in the magic faction, was easier to deal with. Unfortunately, Kill Jaden's seemingly perfect plot was destined to be futile. Duque winked at the leaders. Alright, leaders who agreed to carry out the Normandy invasion, please raise your hand. The result was, of course, unanimous. Imriel looked at Duque with misty eyes. She didn't know what the Normandy invasion was. She only knew that after Sargeras and Archimonde, the last leader of the Burning Legion was about to be toyed to death by Duque. She really couldn't describe how she felt. Would Kill Jaden, who had hunted down the Draenei for 25,000 years, who was known for his cunning and treacherous ways, who made all intelligent beings in the universe tremble and cry in fear, really fall for a trap so easily? If it was someone else, she would definitely scoff at it. However, when she personally climbed the highest peak of Mount Shanger under Tyron's lead and admired Archimonde's huge remains, only bones were left. When she saw the small wound on his spine, she felt an unprecedented admiration for Duque. It was admiration for the person who saved her people, and also the hero who killed the Draenei's enemy. Even if her rationality kept telling her not to have too much hope for the demon commander, her budding heart always hoped for the success of Duque's operation this time. As Imriel waited anxiously, it had been almost a month since the birth of the Shadowblade elves. During this period, the mages who were spies reported that everything was fine in their daily reports. On the other hand, Sylvanas, the Azeroth Academy Award winner of the Best Actress Award, wanted nothing more than to hang these scumbags to death, but she still pretended to be in the dark. She even found an excuse to reduce the benefits of the mages. However, this actually made the mages faction feel more at ease. It was now the 5th of June. Suddenly, on this day, the entire Isle of Quel'Danas shook violently. Chapter 1507. Roar. A strange sound rang out on the Isle of Quel'Danas. The piercing howl quickly formed an intuitive concept in the mind of Sylvanas, who was in the palace of New Silverymoon. If it was like the sharp sound of an arrow being shot, then the length of this arrow was probably the distance between Silverymoon City and the middle of the Long Song Forest. The violent howl swept across the ruins of the old Silverymoon City from west to east, and rushed towards New Silverymoon City. Even though Sylvanas was mentally prepared, he still felt the back of his head go numb. He instinctively pulled Lilith forward, and the two of them rolled behind the sturdy desk. This was her desk, and it was also a piece of armor made by Duque, with strong magic resistance. Almost as soon as the sonic boom rang out, the magic circle of this large armor was activated. Silverymoon City's magic shield was activated along with it. The ignorant people looked at the sudden appearance of a bluish-purple magic shield in the sky above their city, and were at a loss of what to do. A second later, the terrifying sonic boom swept through the western wall of Silverymoon City, and all the windows on the high walls. The magic shield could block direct attacks, even airwaves, but it could not stop the transmission of sound. The blood elves only heard a hum, and the sound seemed to be forced into their brains, causing their eardrums to swell. It was like the humming caused by the imbalance of internal and external air pressure. Even after a few seconds, everyone could still feel the continuous humming in their heads, and it took a long time for them to recover their hearing. The brand new city wall let out a wailing sound, and dust fell in the rustling sound. Although the activation of the magic circle had avoided the direct hit of the sound wave, every window on all the towers above the city wall was creaking. This scene was like the end of the world. On the coast of New Silvery Moon City near the North Sea, a guard on a sentry tower immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Look, what's that?" He pointed to the west. On the Isle of Quel'Danas, it set off clouds of horrifying green mist. As the green fog that symbolized the dark powers dissipated, a monster that was at least 4 or 5 stories tall appeared from within the city wall of the Sunwell Heights. He twisted his head that seemed to have no neck and looked around slowly. It stood on the high ground, and the leaves around it had begun to wither. The layered canopy was like some kind of ornament on its waist, and this behemoth-like monster seemed to have grown out of the highlands of the Sunwell, like a hill on the highlands. This was simply too terrifying. Alarm. Ring the alarm. Let's see if the magical communication is still working. Contact Silvermoon City immediately, and inform Her Majesty the Queen. You and you, split into 3 groups and ride chocobos back to Silverymoon City to report. Coincidentally, one of the powerhouses of Silvermoon City, Haduran Brightwing, had just arrived while patrolling the city's defenses. At first, he did not understand why the Queen had secretly emphasized that he should stay in Silverymoon City and not patrol Longsong Forest. Now he seemed to understand something. The Elven Rangers had always been pragmatic, and compared to the mage faction that emphasized elegance and composure, the Rangers were more capable. It took only 5 minutes from the discovery of a terrifying monster that looked like the Lord of the Abyss to the Queen's throne. Logically speaking, such a big thing would take at least a few hours to be reported to the Queen. Originally, Queen Sylvanas wanted to be the Queen of Shadows, but this was her kingdom, and she was surrounded by her compatriots and people. This time there was no need to act. Queen Sylvanas directly activated the highest level of magical communication in the Alliance. Emergency report. Traces of the Lord of the Abyss have been found on the Isle of Quel'Danas in the Kingdom of Sindorii. Since that is where the Sunwell is, I highly suspect that the Burning Legion will use the Sunwell to invade Azeroth. Requesting emergency assistance from the Alliance. This magical communication to outsiders was like poking a hornet's nest. For a moment, the Alliance was in an uproar and the Horde was shocked. Still in his pajamas, the drama queen Duque made the decision on the spot for the Alliance to enter the highest state of war. In less than 5 minutes, the highest level of red alert sounded in all the main cities and strongholds of the Alliance. Woo woo woo. The ear-piercing alarm echoed in the ears of 90% of the Alliance's soldiers and civilians. The next moment, all the magical communication mirrors set up in the main cities and large villages switched to Sally Whitemane, who had recently taken on a part-time job as a broadcaster. Whether it was the mirror or the magic broadcasting system, Sally's crisp and sonorous voice rang out. This is a red alert announcement. 20 minutes ago, a large-scale invasion of the Burning Legion was discovered on the Isle of Quel'Danas in the Kingdom of Sindorii. Queen Sylvanas Windrunner has requested emergency assistance from the Alliance. Now, all Alliance soldiers immediately cancel their leave and report to the nearest command post. All militias immediately gather at the various military camps. After Duque came to power, he had always emphasized emergency response. Before the first year of the Dark Portal, according to this logistics system that was close to the European Middle Ages, it was already a miracle to be able to mobilize an army of 50,000 people in a month. Now, the Alliance could mobilize an army of 1 million in 5 days. In the East Valley lumberyard in the Elven Forest, hearing the alarm, an old man decisively cut the rope on his carriage. Logs immediately rolled to the side of the road. The reason he did this was because he saw a few disheveled Alliance soldiers carrying their equipment and running in the direction of the town. With one look, he could tell that they were soldiers on leave. There's no time to explain, get on the carriage. The uncle patted the side of his carriage. Thank you, Uncle Doolittle. No need to thank me. You are also protecting our world. In the steam train stations of various sizes, after hearing the alarm, the workers immediately stopped loading the goods. They pushed boxes of goods that had nothing to do with military supplies off the carriage and threw them to the side of the railway. Hurry, hurry. Carriage 1 to 6, load all of them with wheat. Carriage 7 to 12 for the assembled soldiers. As soon as the station master finished speaking, a thin stream of silver flowed into his field of vision. It was the Alliance soldiers, some sitting in carriages, some running. Although they were a little disheveled, it did not hinder them from converging on the railway like rivers flowing into the sea. At this moment, the Alliance, the war machine that had never completely stopped, was once again in full force. Woo woo woo, hearing the alarm, from Stormwind City to the Iron Furnace Fort, to the South Sea City-State, to New Lordaeron, to Kultira's diesel tanks that had been well repaired lifted the canvas covering them. With ear-piercing roars, they drove out of the warehouse built in the cave. The warships that had long been filled with ammunition and fuel whistled, calling the sailors who quickly ran to the ship. Chapter 1508. In the sky above the blasted land, Naxxramas, the floating fortress that the soldiers in the watchtower were used to and mocked as the second moon, rumbled. Usually, if soldiers wanted to go to Naxxramas, they would have to take the airship first and then transport it up one by one. Naxxramas looked like it couldn't wait any longer. It began to slowly land at the designated docking point that was specially opened for it. In order to prevent possible enemy invasion and infiltration, Naxxramas basically stayed in the air. Now that it had taken the initiative to come down and take over the soldiers on rotation, everyone knew how urgent the situation was. In the command post of the watchtower, Boulang Bronzebeard patted Reginald Windsor's shoulder and looked at the powerhouses beside him. I'll leave this place to you. Don't worry. Reginald smiled. No one can pass through here. Gavinrad smiled. Kael'Thats, who was standing next to him, also smiled. In history, the Overwatch fortress was guarded by Archmage Sastranen and General Lodinson, two unknown fellows. Now they were not even ranked in the watchtower. Because the Alliance had completely withdrawn from the Outlands, Danath Trollbane had been sent back by Duque to restore his country. There was no longer a need to go to the Outlands. The watchtower had returned to its function as a gateway to Azeroth, so strengthening its defense was necessary. The latest change was that Reginald was appointed as the Commander-in-Chief of the Watchtower. Under him was the Commander-in-Chief of the Infantry, Gavinrad, the Commander-in-Chief of the Cavalry, Haas, the Commander-in-Chief of the Mages, Kael'Thats, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Artillery, Boulang. As for Naxxramas, Tyrion was now in charge, Kudrin Wildhammer was in charge of the Air Force, and Solarian was in charge of the Mages. Without the losses in history, the Alliance could be said to be full of talents. If the missing Ronin and the others could return, that would be even better. Although Kael'Thats held the title of Speaker of Kirin Tor, the kind-hearted former prince seemed to have no interest in politics. After washing away the stigma of being a traitor, he preferred to be a dedicated character. Especially when it came to the issue of the Well of the Sun this time, he simply avoided arousing suspicion, and did not even return to the Dalajan. Instead, he brought the group of 4 who jumped back to be loyal subjects to guard the borders of planet Azeroth. Although Naxxramas had the teleportation function, in order to avoid any accidents and not to alert the enemy at the beginning, it had not been moved. If he rushed there at full speed, he could reach Silvermoon City within a week. Of course, before that, the Alliance's fleet would arrive first. The port of Kultiras was in an uproar. Aegwynn, dressed as a high elf, tossed the report aside and chuckled. My queen, who are you trying to fool? You guys are really secretive this time, but I've already arranged everything. Gianna was silent at first. The Alliance didn't have a drill earlier or later. It just so happens that in June, they're going to drill for a beach landing and artillery cover? Or a live-fire exercise on the northern coast of Rotterdam. Don't tease me. Starting from May, all the bombs that were shipped to the ship were high-explosive bombs. Also, do you really think I can't receive reports from Vasht's Naga troops? Jaina could only smile bitterly. Can you tell? Nonsense. Of course, I also know that the throne must have asked for confidentiality, so I won't say anything. Egwene was a little unhappy, but she quickly relaxed. That's good too. With such an excellent heir, us guardians of the previous generation can also be more comfortable. Hee. My son has good foresight and has chosen an excellent successor. Now he can enjoy his retirement in peace. Gianna sighed. For so many years, Medivh had been living in self-blame. He always thought that if he had discovered Sargeraz's soul in his body earlier, or if his will had been stronger, he might have been able to suppress Sargeraz and avoid opening the dark portal, causing a series of disasters now. He did not think that Sargeraz had been causing trouble since he was still in his mother's womb. Would he really let him grow into a strong-willed man like Uther? But let bygones be bygones. Clearly, her man Duque had done a better job than Medivh and Egwene in becoming a guardian. At that moment, Duque had already taken Tyrion and Tyron to Silverymoon through the portal. With a Tish, a godly item with spatial properties, Duke wasn't afraid of being intercepted when he teleported in Azeroth. Sylvanas breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Duque's arrival. After Duque went out for a walk and reassured the Sindorii, Queen Sylvanas nervously informed him of the latest situation. Kill Jaden has not arrived yet, but the situation at the Sunwell Highlands is not looking good. In addition to the Lord of the Abyss, we also found a blue dragon. With that, Queen Sylvanas sent the occasional surveillance images to the magic mirror. Duque slapped his forehead. How could I have forgotten about this guy? It was a beautiful adult blue dragon. His huge body faintly showed incomparably beautiful lines in the misty dark energy weapon that intersected light and darkness. It was a tension filled with a sense of power. The scales, which were as detailed as a work of art, were a beautiful sky blue. However, there were some places, such as the crown, that were faintly green. Of course, Duque recognized him. Wasn't he Calegos, who later became the Blue Dragon King in history? Guys with a little green on their heads often did not have a good ending, such as Illidan, who had pretended to join the army. A prairie on his head. That was a symbol of dark energy corruption. Oh no, oh no. Sickness must be treated. Don't King drag it out. Ahem, that was generally true, but Calegos, Duque did not know what to say about him. Before transmigrating, the official introduction that Duke saw said, Calegos is a member of the Blue Dragon Legion. As one of the few dragon eggs that survived the destruction of the Wings of Death, he is a new generation of dragons born. He is powerful and wise, and he can quickly take charge. Sounds awesome, right? But look at his original record in history. He was shot down from the sky in Cuel Salis by the dwarves with muskets. He was controlled by a demon in the Sunwell. He was chased by the black dragons in the Cataclysm, and went to seek refuge with the goblins as Hara. In the end, he found the old blue dragon Azuragos, who liked the soul healer, and destroyed the group of black dragons. He was beaten up by the Twilight Dragon, and the orange staff girl who supported him died. He was shot down by the Horde's airship during the Battle of Thermore. Deathwing instantly destroyed the Horde's airship. It was no wonder that Duque had completely forgotten about this guy. Calegos was so weak that he could scratch his feet. He was a disgrace to the dragons. Chapter 1509. If Duke remembered correctly, this guy should have come to quell the loss after the Well of the Sun was blown up by Arthas. Even if Duke rebuilt the Well of the Sun, Maligos, who was worried about the spread of the energy of the Well of the Sun, still decided to send Calegos to quell the loss. The mission given to him by the Blue Dragon King was to investigate the remaining energy of the Well of the Sun that had been destroyed by the Scourge not long ago. This was not unprecedented. After all, Illidan had used a bottle of water from the Well of Eternity to create a new Well of Eternity. Kale, that's grandfather, had used a bottle of water from the Well of Eternity to create the Well of the Sun. Who knew if there would be a second or third Well of the Sun? If history had not changed, then Calegos had transformed into a blue-haired human youth, Carrie, and searched everywhere in Cuel Salis and Lordaeron. By chance, he found a strange human girl named Anvina who lived with her parents, and they had a good impression of each other. Dragon Mage Krasis jumped out to explain that he had created an illusion to prevent the Scourge from obtaining the energy of the Well of the Sun. That illusion was Anvina. As a high-level red dragon, Envina, although she was the carrier of the energy of the Well of the Sun, was also flesh and blood, and had feelings. Soon she fell in love with Kalegos. Kalegos swore to protect Envina's safety. At this point, the development of things should be similar to history. As for what happened next, suddenly, Khadgar's magic message arrived. It was also something that seemed to come from a floating bottle, but it described something that did not match the known history of Duque. A certain traitor, without asking, it was the Sun King who had betrayed his country and Azeroth, secretly guided a group of demons, the Eridar Gemini, to find the incarnation of the Well of the Sun, Envina. While Kalegos was not around, he used a group of lackeys to capture Envina, and began an evil ritual on the highlands of the Well of the Sun. The purpose was to summon the commander of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden, and the brave Kalegos bravely charged into the Well of the Sun, but it seemed that he was captured instead of saving her. After reading this, Duque rubbed his eyebrows, and could not help but sigh at the terrible inertia of history. All right, I'll report this to the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Duke turned his head and waved his hand. A magic mirror appeared out of thin air, and the red dragon symbol on the oval mirror disappeared after only 2 seconds, as if ripples had appeared on the surface of the mirror. The mirror image showed a red-haired mature woman with her arms akimbo in an S pose. Yo, Duque, is it about the thing you mentioned before? Yes, but we have a small interlude here. It seems that Kalegos of the Sleeping Dragon Temple has been captured by the demons. According to our intelligence, it's very likely that he's been enslaved by some kind of will. Before Duque could finish, an angry voice came from beside Alexstrasza. That idiot! What a disgrace to the dragon race. Then the voice cursed for a while. It was obvious that it was the blue dragon's boss Malygos. The red dragon queen had to cast a spell to shield herself before the communication became quiet. Hey, I saw your formation from above. Aren't you afraid of scaring Kil'jaeden away? Or, what if Kil'jaeden really did descend upon them? It would be good to intercept him, but it would be bad if you play with fire. Once he successfully descends, he will definitely bring his army to the void battlefield. I don't have the time to help you besiege Kil'jaeden. Duque smiled. His smile showed the strongest confidence. As soon as he opened his mouth, his words were like iron. When you were captured, I saved you. If you want to deal with Nesario, I helped you deal with it. Even if he's as strong as Thun, I still helped you create a time difference on the battlefield, and even Thun was destroyed. When have I ever disappointed you? The red dragon queen rolled her eyes. She had an expression that said, "You're so powerful and I'm speechless." Alright. You're also a demigod who went through life and death with Azeroth. I won't ask about your backup plan. I agree this time. Oh, Malygos wants you to kill that useless son of a B*TCH as well, so as not to embarrass him. Duque shrugged his shoulders. For the time being, this could be considered as getting an imperial sword. Is there anything else? The red-haired queen in the mirror asked. Let me have a word with her. The image quickly changed, and a beautiful black-haired queen appeared. Yo, my mount, how are you doing in the void battlefield? Onyxia spat out 3 words, very boring. Work hard in the void battlefield this time. I'll bring you flying when you come back. Duque said with a double meaning. The black dragon princess blushed instantly, and then nodded quietly. The communication ended. In the fortress of the void battlefield, Alexstrasza glanced at the descendant of the black dragon who had just finished communicating with Duque and sighed in her heart. Onyxia is good in every aspect, but she lacks the sense of responsibility to protect the world. She's always not motivated, so she tends to save her life and retreat in battle. She didn't expect Duque's words to increase her fighting spirit. How magical! In Silvermoon City, Rothmatherin entered the hall where Queen Sylvanas was and bowed. Your Majesty, the Alliance's fleet that is acting on the northern coast has received your request for help. They have now arrived at the border, and they request to enter and fight together. Granted. After sending Rothma away, Sylvanas seemed a little worried. Are we reacting too quickly? I'm afraid of scaring Kil'jaeden. If we only kill a Lord of the Abyss with such a big formation. Duque raised his right index finger and shook it proudly. No. You underestimate Kil'jaeden, and the Burning Legion's desire for something on planet Azeroth. As the only two ways to enter this planet, if we don't take any precautions and act like a trap, then we'll really scare Kil'jaeden away. If we react too strongly, it'll actually speed up Kil'jaeden's entry. Queen Sylvanas' expression became strange. Fortunately, she didn't say, "You people who play with tactics are all dirty." Otherwise, Duque really didn't know what expression to use to face the Queen of Darkness, who was originally on the verge of entering the evil path in history. Duque continued, "The combat power of mortals can at most deal with ordinary demons. The real deciding factor is the combat power of hero level or above, as well as timing." Timing. Queen Sylvanas didn't know how many times she had heard this word. Kil'jaeden's main body was too powerful and huge. Ordinary portals couldn't withstand such a powerful demon passing through at all. For example, in the Ancient War, Sargeras wanted to enter, but even if he used up all the energy of the entire Well of Eternity, it still took him a long time. In addition, he used all his strength outside to barely make an opening. Chapter 15:10. Queen Sylvanas still remembered Duque's explanation during the Secret Throne meeting. Kil'jaeden is the most cunning of the Burning Legion's three powerhouses. With the incident with Archimonde, it's unlikely that he will invest all of his soul in this descent. There's a high chance that he will find a way to let his body pass through and invest no more than half of his soul. Only then will he be able to bear the consequences of failure. In less than 10 years, he will be able to completely resurrect in the Twisting Nether. How much Kil'jaeden's body passes through the teleportation gate is a very delicate task. If it's too much, his power will be too great, and it may cause uncontrollable consequences. If it's too little, it won't matter to him. The lost limbs will recover in a few months. I've studied it with Goddess Elun for a long time, and we think that a ratio of 40% to 60% is the most appropriate. At that time, William and Magni had asked how Duque was going to ensure that the timing was right. Duque raised 3 fingers. Firstly, I rebuilt the Well of the Sun. In order to prevent the Sun King and Nastrian from retaliating, I secretly changed some things. When Duque said the first point, Queen Sylvanas still glared at Duque. Although she and Duque had already kissed each other, it was unheard of for Duque to cause trouble so early on. Secondly, I've already set up the magic net. Goddess Elun will also act at the same time as me. Of course, under such circumstances, the Isle of Quel'Danas will probably be lost. But we can guarantee that the damage won't spread to the Sin-Dorii kingdom. Hearing this, the leaders were actually relieved. Thirdly, I can reveal part of the mystery to everyone this time. Why I've always had such accurate information about the Burning Legion. This time, everyone's curiosity was piqued. All along, the information that Duque provided about the Burning Legion had always been 100% accurate. Even if it wasn't comprehensive, at least the part that he provided was absolutely correct. This could no longer be described as investigation or spying. Sure enough, Duque confirmed their guesses. When I returned to the Ancient War, I accidentally buried a chess piece. I didn't expect that even after 15 years in the Door of Darkness, when I didn't know that I would return to the past in the future, my chess piece had already faithfully fulfilled its duty and provided me with information. Of course, now that things had come to this, my chess piece's situation in the army was a little dangerous. If we can successfully ambush Kil'jaeden this time, I will retrieve this chess piece in front of everyone. When Duque admitted this in front of everyone, the leaders almost fainted. This was way too awesome. He had relied on the Bronze Dragon King to return to the past, infiltrate the army, and wreak havoc on Sargeras. Even his lair had been blown up. He actually had the time to set up a spy. Based on the intelligence he had previously come into contact with, this hidden chess piece's level was quite high. Otherwise, in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, it would have been impossible to know how many leaders Archimonde had, and what skills and specialties they had. At that moment, who knew how many alliance leaders gave Duque a thumbs up in admiration. Duque, you're awesome. You're so awesome. After thinking about it, Queen Sylvanas sighed softly. On the other side, Tyrion Fordring had already led the Silverhand Knights through the portal and joined the kingdom's elite troops led by Hageron. They were near the coastline, watching the demons and enchanted elves of the Isle of Quel'Danas from across the water. When only Duque, Queen Sylvanas, and Tyrande were left in the hall, Tyrande suddenly said softly, "Duque, I'm thinking that your spy in the Burning Legion isn't the Eridar Gemini, is it?" This sentence hit the bull's eye. Duque's face fell, not because he had been hit, but because of Tyrande's as expected expression. Her slightly resentful eyes were clearly saying, "You pervert, it's not enough that you harmed me in the ancient war, now you want to add Vashj as well. So there's the Eridar Gemini." It wasn't just Tyrande, even Sylvanas looked as if she understood everything. Duque panicked and immediately tried to explain. "Hey, wait, it's true that I forced the Eridar Gemini to surrender, but the process isn't what you think. There's really nothing going on between me and those two demonesses." Who knew that Tyrande and Sylvanas had already started to use their ultimate moves? Tyrande held her own face with a little resentment. "Sigh, as your woman, I've never asked you about your personal matters. I only hope that you have some control." Queen Sylvanas also sighed. "I used to think that it was a good thing that you had no racial bias and could completely accept the elves. Only now do I realize that your hobbies are getting wider and wider. First it was the dragon. Then it was the Naga. Don't think that we didn't notice that you've been staring at him reels but recently." "Sigh, that's true. Elves can't have that kind of butt." Queen Sylvanas twisted her body and stuck out her butt, but immediately gave up. This time, Duque was like mud falling on his pants. Even if it wasn't sh*t, it was still sh*t. His two women were singing the same tune. This was practically the same as the women from before Duque's transmigration. To explain was to cover up, and to cover up was useless. The more he tried to explain, the worse it would get. Even if Duque really had a bold idea before, he hadn't put it into action yet. Duque's heart took 100,000 points of damage, and he suddenly felt like he had nothing left to live for. Duque raised his head 45 degrees to the sky, as if there were tears in his eyes. "Anyway, I've never touched the Eridar Gemini. Believe it or not, it's up to you." With that, Duque left without looking back. Tyrande and Queen Sylvanas looked at each other. Could it be that we've really misunderstood Duque? Then should we apologize to him? Let's finish this war first. All right. Outside the city, while the Horde was still hesitating on whether or not to start the war again, the war machine that was the Alliance was already in full swing. Boom, boom, boom. Magical puppets that were almost 2 stories tall were brought out from New Silverymun's warehouse. They formed a huge line from the west gate all the way to the shore near the Isle of Quel'Danas. On the shore, even Hadron himself was surprised, because he saw that not far from the beach, there were many hemispherical magical cannons rising from the ground. All of the cannons were aimed at the Isle of Quel'Danas. Obviously, these things did not belong to the old Silverymoon city. If they did, they would have been able to use them when Arthas came to Silverymoon City to cause trouble. These expensive magic cannons were obviously Dalaran's handiwork just by looking at their appearance. When did they get here? Hadron knew about this, but he didn't know that it was of such a scale and quantity. Chapter 15:11. Firearms were very costly. Ever since the destruction of the old Silverymoon City, in order to rebuild the new Silverymoon City, the treasury was like a rat race. The most abominable thing was that after the Sun King Anastrian committed treason, he had his henchmen steal the treasury. This was not done on the day of the treason, but after he followed the Lich King, the elves who were loyal to him kept stealing, and most of them were mages in charge of magic formations. This was also why Sylvanas did not want to please the mage faction. After being in power for thousands of years, no one could get used to suddenly changing to a lowly person. And the 4 Windrunner sisters were from the Ranger family, so the 2 factions were destined to be unable to truly cooperate. So basically, when they caught those mages, they could leave the things behind and go. Normally, when a country was destroyed, the treasury was emptied, and the collapse of the country was inevitable. But the 3 Windrunner sisters were Duque's women. Since the Dark Portal's 2nd year, the Marcus family had been collecting copyright fees, and almost all new inventions had a share of Duque. For example, the railways throughout the Eastern Kingdom's mainland were all funded by the Marcus family. Building the railways was free, and the manpower, materials, and even maintenance fees were all paid by the Marcus family. Anyone who used the railways had to pay, right? Every carriage, every pound of goods had to pay a fare. It seemed cheap, but with the extremely exaggerated transportation volume, it was an astronomical figure. This move was learned from the Celestial Empire before Duque's transmigration. The Belt and Road Initiative was provided by him, building the railways, invigorating the economy, driving the logistics, and improving the local people's living standards. At the same time, his family's market was also monopolized by him. Anyway, the flatbread was getting bigger and bigger. Even if he ate the biggest portion, at least he ate more than before. As the wealthiest family in the world, the wealth that they had accumulated was enough for Cindorii to revive. Duque doted on his women, and that was how awesome he was. It was really not a joke to say that he was as rich as a country. If he ran out of money one day, the queen would make an emergency visit to Karazhan and unlock a new position. Because of this, Kuel Salas's remaining mages faction could not do much. Either they had been completely subdued by Queen Sylvie, or they had been sent to the Isle of Quel'Danas to serve as food. Since all the people with different political views were gathered on the island, and they had willingly become the Burning Legion's minions, there was no need to be polite. General Brightwing, all 388 magic cannons are ready. Please give your orders. A blood elf saluted Hadgeron. The most important feature of the alliance was that the military system of each country would be unified into the alliance system. Even the military ranks would be completely changed to NCOs, lieutenants, majors, and generals. The ranks of general and below could be conferred by each country. However, the armies of each country had a unified numbering system, and all independent designations had to be reported to the alliance for approval before they could be implemented. Hadgeron sighed. The Isle of Quel'Danas has been occupied by the half-demon Shadowblade elves. There are no more of our kind there. So the queen ordered the cannons to be fired at the Isle of Quel'Danas. I understand. A few minutes later, there was a strange whooshing sound along the entire coastline. Looking over from New Silvermoon City, it was as if a dazzling rainbow had suddenly appeared on the shore, piercing through the sky and forming beautiful arcs. Finally, it fell into the former holy land of the elves, the Isle of Quel'Danas, where the Well of the Sun was located. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Violent explosions sounded from every corner of the island. The elves in charge of watching and monitoring the results of the battle had tears streaming down their faces at some point. Their tears flowed and flowed again and again. After splitting from the night elves who rejected the use and research of magic, the high elves had lived a life that respected magic for a full 8,000 years. They had long been used to the existence of magic, to the island that was regarded as a holy land by everyone, and to the sunwell that always produced a huge amount of magic energy. But now they were going to destroy it. On the surveillance screen, the exquisite pavilions were reduced to brightly colored debris that no longer had any artistic value. The forest path with the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers had turned into huge craters. This was a farewell to the history of their race. In the frontline command post close to the sea, Queen Sylvanas and Lilith were silent when they saw the weeping elves on the screen. Duque said, "Now you understand why I insisted that Cindorii fire the first shot, right? If the Alliance's fleet fired first, Cindorii would always inexplicably vent his anger on them. The hellfire is coming," Lorthamar warned. On the screen, countless stone giants that were burning with green flames and as tall as a full 3-story building rushed out of the island with huge and fast steps. These war machines that had no intelligence and only had the ability to carry out simple tactics had once beaten the Alliance to a pulp. However, the era of conquering the world with one move had long passed. Let the magic puppets go up. Queen Sylvanas waved her hand. Countless magic puppets that glowed with a unique purple-blue arcane light walked out of the passageway with heavy steps, past the battle formation of the Blood Elves, and lined up neatly on the shore. The hellfire strode into the water, which was not very deep. Although there was seawater between the Isle of Quel'Danas and the Kingdom of Cindorii, it was actually a relatively shallow harbor. The deepest part was only about 20 meters. The burning hellfire rushed into the water. Of course, The demonic flames on their bodies would not be extinguished by the seawater so easily. Instead, they crazily evaporated the seawater. Plop, plop. On the surface of the water, the position of each hellfire could be clearly seen. Because of the high temperature, a large number of bubbles appeared in the water. A few minutes later, the hellfire had already engaged the magic puppets of the elves on the shore. It was a very primitive battle without any sense of beauty to speak of. If you hit me, I'll hit you back. Generally speaking, the puppets were more quickly dismantled into parts, while the hellfire were more resistant to beatings. Holy light formation fire. Hadgeron ordered expressionlessly. Half a minute later, a deafening roar came from the elves' rear formation. Large-caliber mortars were firing at them. Mortar shells filled with Stratholme's holy water began to pour down on the beach. Coupled with the water spray trucks that were temporarily modified from fire trucks, they sprayed golden water pillars dozens of meters away. For a moment, the entire shore was shining with golden light. It was a beautiful sight. In the command center, Duque secretly yawned. He really could not get excited about this kind of battle that was like chickens pecking at each other. Has our fleet arrived? Duque asked Jaina in the magic mirror. Yes. Chapter 1512. Countless huge and long shadows swept across the surface of the blue sea. It was as if the army of angels under the throne of God had sent wave after wave of arrows raining down from the sky. The clouds were wantonly swept away, and the birds that were originally soaring in the sky screamed and fled in all directions. A griffin was flying at a low altitude, followed by a second and a third. The huge flock of griffins flew in small groups. Even though they had deliberately kept their distance, there were just too many of them. They looked like a swarm of locusts, covering the sky and covering the sun. Locusts also had two colors. The white and yellow ones were the griffins. The purple-black ones were the hippogriffs. Ever since the Alliance became rich in resources, there was now a large amount of coarse fodder to feed cattle and other livestock. Every time the livestock were fattened up, they would be placed in the hunting grounds for the griffins or the hippogriffs to hunt. After more than 20 years, the Alliance had more than 10,000 griffins, and the number of hippogriffs had also exceeded 4,000. This time, they brought along 5,000 griffins and 2,000 hippogriffs. It was not these birds that were flying in the sky. It was a huge fleet that could not be counted by the human eye. On the skybreaker, the strong wind blew her long blonde hair, and the strands of hair swept across her face. Jaina lifted her chin and turned her body in a playful manner, looking at the scene from a 360-degree angle. From her vision to the horizon and the horizon, the vast space of hundreds of square kilometers seemed to have formed a flat arc. On the island at the far east of this arc, the green aura of dark energy shot up into the sky, and on the land at the farthest end, the golden aura continued to flourish. Other than that, everything within sight was built by the people of the Alliance. It could be said to be the crystallization of the perfect combination of intelligence and military power, and it gave off a glow that filled one with a sense of pride. On the mainland of the Kingdom of Sindorii, because the Isle of Quel'Danas was located northwest of the mainland, they could also see the huge fleet of steel ships stretching from the sky to the sea in the west. Because of the horizon, it looked like a magic trick, as battleships after battleships grew out of thin air from that line. The flying battleship seemed to be parked in midair, but in an instant, it grew larger and larger until it occupied more than half the sky. On the surface of the sea, there were even more densely packed black dots. At first, they were black dots, but when they unfurled the magical power furnaces on the warships, the runes on the defensive spell formation shone, making the warships that had long abandoned their sails seem to have returned to the olden days when they relied on sailboats to cross the sea. Duque led the Alliance into the industrial era, which was also an era of steel. When magic and technology were perfectly combined, there was a huge fleet of more than 3,000 ships. What was even more terrifying was that this fleet was not the main force of the Alliance. The main fleet of the Alliance was still on the sea opposite Kurtiras, waiting for the arrival of the main fleet of Stormwind. After all, they could not bring the main fleet to the sea opposite Rotterdam. Otherwise, it would be too fake. The main fleet was also the reason why this B squadron dared to launch an all-out attack. If the griffins and flying battleships were like locusts just now, then when the Black Fleet appeared on the sea, for a moment, the elves thought that they were seeing a school of sardines. The ships that appeared like stars because of the magic shield appeared in the vision of all the elves. The Blood Elves suddenly felt a sense of rejoice that although they were forced to abandon the olden era where magic was respected, they were fortunate to have caught the last train of the new era. The new battleships of the Alliance had long since refreshed the traditional concept of the tonnage of battleships. Once upon a time, at the end of the first battle of the Dark Portal, Aurelia arrived at South Shore with the Elven fleet, using a small frigate that was still dozens of tons. The frigates all started at 1,000 tons. The destroyers started at 5,000 tons. The cruisers had more than 10,000 tons. The battleships had more than 50,000 tons. Of course, Duque did not intend to build such a big one. However, the dwarves' craftsmanship could not reach modern standards in terms of steel quality. In order to maintain the strength of the various indicators of the battleships, everything was built thick and hard. Anyway, there was a large supply of iron ore from the tribe, and the dwarves could afford it. Then it became like this. Duque had long planned that one day, he would dismantle all those old battleships and put them back into the furnace to be remade. The first to enter the elves' field of vision were the lightest frigates. Almost as soon as they arrived, they formed a densely packed defensive formation to prevent attacks from any direction. As cannons, the frigates were not equipped with strong equipment. However, they were loaded with a lot of depth charges. It could not be helped. If it was just the Burning Legion, it would be easy to deal with them. The demons in the Legion did not like to play with water. The problem was that they still had to guard against the ancient god N'Zoth, who was known to have 1,000 tentacles. Historically, N'Zoth was still doing nothing at this point in time. However, after so many problems, Duque no longer had much hope in the goddess of destiny's integrity. It was better to always have the initiative in his own hands. First, the fastest frigates dispersed, then the destroyers, and finally the cruisers, which were mainly anti-air, protected the slower battleships as they entered the sea. It was like this on the sea, and it was the same in the sky. The small and medium-sized ships, with the larger battleships as the center, formed a three-dimensional formation. Hiss, the elves gasped. With Sin Dorii opening fire first, the Alliance fleet no longer had any reservations. Fire, Jaina ordered. The huge cannons on the battleships with a diameter of over 400 millimeters first let out a shocking roar. On the Isle of Quel'Danas, a Shadowblade elf asked the frontline commander Eridar Gemini, "The Alliance's cannons have opened fire. We should put up a magic protection formation." Elises frowned. Most of the energy in the Sunwell has been diverted to the summoning ritual. Queen Saloras nodded. The important summoning ritual cannot be interrupted. Otherwise, Lord Kil'jaeden will skin us alive. Then let's defend the key areas. Abandon the rest of the Isle of Quel'Danas. Even though his body had become half demon, the Shadowblade elf's face still twitched. However, his soul no longer belonged to him. The order from the demon boss must be carried out to the letter. On the entire island, only the Sunwell Highlands had a magic shield. A few seconds later, the earth shook. The Eridar Gemini's faces were filled with shock. None of the cannonballs hit the Sunwell Highlands, but they heard a rustling sound coming from the top of the hall, as if something was breaking. They looked up and heard a loud bang. A huge crack suddenly appeared on the golden ceiling, and then the left and right walls were instantly asymmetrical. The ground on one side began to rumble and sink. God, the Alliance's cannons actually cracked this place. Chapter 15-13. Lord Brutalis. What do we do? The Eridar twins handed the ball to the Lord of the Abyss. A fallen phoenix was no better than a chicken. The twins, who were once Kil'jaeden's trusted subordinates, were now just ordinary demons that Kil'jaeden hadn't abandoned yet. In fact, the fact that the noble Eridar twins, who were good at working behind enemy lines and plotting, was reduced to a fighter at the front line was enough to prove that Kil'jaeden didn't like the twins. Therefore, after the medium-sized teleportation gate was opened, the Lord of the Abyss, Brutalis, wasn't the twins in charge. This very powerful general of the Burning Legion who had even attached a huge double-edged sword to one of his arms and a sawtooth scimitar to the other, was also a little worried. The Lords of the Abyss had always been trusted by the higher-ups of the army. They were given the position of vanguard and the authority of frontline commanders, not because they were very good at planning, but because they had a strong ability to execute orders. According to their original estimation, the weak Sindorii kingdom wouldn't be able to fight back at all. By the time they notified the alliance that something had happened here and slowly gathered their troops, it would be too late. Kil'jaeden had already completed his arrival. Now the situation was completely unexpected. The alliance's reaction was unexpectedly fast. It was unknown if it was a coincidence or intentional, but the alliance had directly pulled over the fleet that was doing a military exercise nearby. It had only been a few hours. No matter how one looked at it, there was a strong smell of conspiracy. Brutalist knew very well that Lord Kil'jaeden had given a death order. If they couldn't hold on until the largest teleportation gate was opened, even he probably wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Look, the Eridar twins were so spoiled back then, but now they could only be cannon fodder at the front line. If they successfully arrived this time, they might have a chance to turn the tables. If they failed, Brutalist glanced at the twins and realized that they had actually pulled over most of their souls and their main bodies. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, these two bitches are really going all out. Pulling over their main bodies and putting in most of their souls would allow them to have more combat power after the arrival, but if they failed, the price would be even more tragic. Few demons were willing to put in more than half of their souls when it came to high-risk fieldwork like the Archherons. However, demons were demons. Of course, they wouldn't be so kind as to care about others' lives, especially when they were of different races. The Lord of the Abyss, who was jokingly called Fatty Boo by the players, pondered for a moment. The teleportation must continue. The resistance of those insignificant mortals was already within Lord Kil'jaeden's expectations, so there was no need to worry. I'll teleport a few more lords over. You'll be in charge of defense in the meantime. After saying that, Fatty Boo moved his fat dragon-shaped lower body and began to run to the sun well. The twins glanced at each other. Due to their long-standing tacit understanding, a single glance was all it took for them to communicate. Seeing that Fatty Cloth had left, Gemini immediately started to set the pace. The teleportation ritual must not be disturbed. Expand the range of the protective barrier. If you don't have enough magic power, use the Sunwell's reserves. Send out the Apocalypse Guards. Half of them will guard the sky above the Isle of Quel'Danas, the other half will attack the humans' floating fleet, and finally attack the ones on the sea. From the sound of it, every order given by Gemini was very appropriate and steady. They clearly carried out the will of the Vanguard commander, and no one would be able to find fault with them. Although the demons below looked down on Gemini from the bottom of their hearts, Gemini's combat power was still at the level of a lord. Now that she was holding the Imperial sword, the demons could only obey. On the other side, in the magic mirror, seeing the Burning Legion's actions, Duque couldn't help but laugh out loud. What's wrong? Queen Sylvanas didn't feel that there was anything wrong with dividing half of the Apocalypse Guards to attack, and the other half to defend. Duque proudly shook his index finger. Half of the power to attack, and the other half to defend. It seems very safe, but there's a premise. The opponent's strength is far inferior to yours. As long as the opponent's strength is similar to yours, then doing this is courting death. When Queen Shi heard this, she immediately understood. It was like a person punching with 50 kilograms of strength and 50 kilograms of defense. If the opponent punched with 100 kilograms of strength, how could you defend with only 50 kilograms of strength? Then as a whole, if the defense failed, you wouldn't even be able to attack. When Duque bragged that Gemini was his subordinate, Queen Sylvanas didn't dare to believe it completely, but now she was at least 80% convinced. Duque then gave Tyrande a look, and Tyrande immediately understood. She opened a magic message and said something. In the sky, the Apocalypse Guards covered the sky and covered the earth as they charged over aggressively. There weren't many of them, only about 500 of them, but their strength was not proportional to each other. It was not that the Apocalypse Guards were bragging, but they could easily take on 10 Griffin Knights at once, because it was an all-around suppression. Griffins and hippogriffons may be flying beasts, but they did not have long-range attacks. The Apocalypse Guards could use all kinds of shadow and dark magic. The natural gap in range could not be made up by the Griffin Knight's storm warhammers, or the Night Elves' bows. Moreover, the dark powers had miraculous effects on almost any type of armor. The only thing that could fight against dark energy was the holy light. In the eyes of the Apocalypse Guards, as soon as these seemingly extraordinary birds entered their magic range, they would see a sky full of bird feathers and blood splattering everywhere. They wondered how these guys would feel when they saw the birds that they had painstakingly bred being killed in a single move. Their expressions of despair and grief would be very funny. Unknowingly, they accelerated and charged at the Alliance's flying fleet. Their desire to kill was so strong that they didn't notice that the distance between the Alliance's flying beasts was already very far apart. In front of the Alliance's flying fleet, on the bow of Hood, a female general wearing a deep purple armor with complicated patterns engraved on every corner of the armor was standing in the wind with her arms crossed in front of her chest. The strong wind blew her long hair, and her gorgeous cloak was almost on the same level as the sea, making a fluttering sound. Chandri's Feathermoon was the great general of the Night Elves. In the eyes of others, she was the most powerful and beautiful elf. But this female general, who always had a serious expression on her face, suddenly moved her long ears, and then a gentle expression appeared on her face. Got it. In her field of vision, the front suddenly opened up as all the griffins and hippogriffons were stuck in the firing range of the Apocalypse Guards and spread out. At that moment, all the Apocalypse Guards saw it. It's my turn. Chapter 15-14. No one had expected Tyrann's adopted daughter to be so talented. Ever since her parents died in the War of the Ancients, and she was adopted by Tyrant, Chandri's had slowly grown up. Although she had never joined the Elun Sisterhood, and wasn't an official priest of the Moon Goddess Temple, she was one of the only 2 night elves who could use Luna Rail Cannon. This skill was called Falling Stars, and it was an ultimate skill that covered all areas of the map. Its power was insane and inhumane. Almost everywhere he looked, powerful enemies were annihilated. The only thing that restricted this skill was not the divine power of the moon goddess Elun, but the mental strength of the caster who guided the falling stars. Other than Chandri's, only Tyrant, who was a high priest and a ranger, had the ability to instantly lock onto more than 100 moving targets. Apart from Chandri's, mental strength, magic power, and faith were all indispensable. Since Duque intentionally told Tyrant to hold back on this ultimate skill, the important task of clearing out the Apocalypse Guards was given to Chandri's. After chanting an incantation that wasn't very long, a magic circle with complicated runes that kept revolving under Chandri's feet was activated. In the sky, a white and flawless beam of light descended from the sky, covering an area of 10 meters around Chandri's. Countless magic runes and symbols that represented the moon rotated clockwise on this beam of light that reached the sky. In the name of the moon goddess Elun die, demons. Along with Chandri's heroic declaration, countless purple beams of light descended from the sky and focused on the heads of the Apocalypse Guards. Regardless of whether they were doing Thomas's spin or zigzag, the beam of light that shrouded their heads followed them and kept aiming at their heads. In the next moment, the number of pieces of the debris of the stars fell on the heads of the Apocalypse Guards. It was a declaration of death, and it was inevitable destruction. When they finally realized that dodging was a joke, every Apocalypse Guard stopped moving and began to adjust their magic shields. If they couldn't dodge, they would take it head-on. Almost every Doomsday Guard thought the same. But at this moment, the Alliance's air fleet, which had already flattened the ship's hull, and the surface fleet below, suddenly set off a rain of holy light that all demons could not forget. With the octuple bang cannon as the core and a considerable number of 40mm Bofors cannons, the Alliance's new fleet taught the Burning Legion a good lesson with the holy light cannons blessed by the Naru. Once upon a time, mortals were incomparably weak in front of demons. Ordinary swords didn't even have the qualifications to cut demons. They would be turned into dregs by all kinds of spells before they even got close. In fact, during the first year of the Dark Portal, Even the most capable holy knights wouldn't laugh at the cowardice of ordinary soldiers. That was because in the face of absolute power, all courage would pale in comparison. As for the so-called meaning, only the historians would write about it with heavy words, but in fact, it was useless. Back then, Archimonde had destroyed the Dalagan without much effort. With a gentle wave of his hand, no matter what the mortals did, it would be useless. In the eyes of the mortals, the impregnable magic tower was rumbling and trembling. The bricks used to build it were falling apart and falling to the ground. The magic inscriptions engraved on the bricks became the epitaph of the mages. The dark energy swept over like a storm, and then all the buildings began to tilt and collapse. The surviving mages could only watch as the buildings that symbolized the Dalagan's glory for more than 2,000 years cracked open one after another before finally collapsing into pieces. The first official appearance of the Burning Legion was a silent mockery of the weakness of mortals. But today, everything was different. The air fleet, which had integrated its attack methods, was also equipped with a large number of magic cannons. Apart from the white smoke, one could also see a series of golden crystal-like beams shooting out from the muzzles. The beams streaked across the sky for thousands of meters before finally piercing into the group of Apocalypse guards like a torrential rain of golden light beams. If the Doomsday guards only had to face Chandriza's Luna rail cannon, they might have been able to survive it. But the attack of the compound attribute had cut off their last shred of luck. These brutal flying creatures that had conquered countless planets and worlds and came from the twisted void had their wings or bodies pierced in an instant. They did not even have time to wail before they turned into countless irregular parts and fell from the sky, raining down a dirty rain of green blood. Well done. Did you hear that? Damn the demons. This is the resistance of the mortals. Cheers rang out in the Alliance. At that moment, Queen Sylvanas, who was at the frontline command, also smiled in satisfaction. Demons like the Doomsday Guards were considered high-level soldiers in the Burning Legion. They were almost omnipotent in the sky, underground, and the sea, and their rich combat experience meant that they were rarely at a disadvantage. Who knew that the Alliance would be able to kill more than 500 Doomsday Guards in one shot? If the demons do not send more troops, it will not be difficult to finish off the rest of the demons. Duque could not agree with Queen Sylvanas. How is that possible? I will be happy even if we can kill them faster than the demons. At that moment, a guard suddenly came to report. Queen Sylvanas heard this. Let her in. The person who was brought in by the guards was a beautiful female elf with a graceful figure, fair skin, and light blue hair. But no one in the command center would think of her as a Sindorii or Queldorii. She seemed to be so emotional that she did not retract her dragon's aura. Duque stood up and walked over. He extended his hand to the blue-haired lady. Welcome, Lady Matagosa. No need for the pleasantries. If you did not tell me that you have absolute confidence in saving Calegos, no one would have been able to stop me. The lady called Matagosa did not seem reasonable. Duque smiled. Anyone familiar with the dragon name would know who she was after hearing the name Matagosa. As a member of the Blue Dragon Legion and a good friend of the Blue Dragon Calegos, Matagosa joined the army against Kill Jaden's evil plan without hesitation. The original history was, after Calegos was controlled because he was alone, she went deep into the hinterland of the Well of the Sun to search for Calegos' whereabouts, and eventually fought the Lord of the Abyss, Brutalis, to the death. Unfortunately, her strength was too limited and she died in the hands of Fatty Boo. The third boss of the Sunwell Highlands, Fimes, was transformed from the corpse of this female Matagosa. Chapter 15:15. No one knew how much work Duque had done behind the scenes to wait for Kill Jaden to come in. There were originally 6 bosses in the Well of the Sun. Number 5, Muru, had become the guardian of the Dreenei's new capital, Exodar, in Azeroth due to the changes in history. Number 4, Eridar Gemini, had said to Duque, haha. Number 3, Femis, was still alive and kicking. Cursing her to die and become a bone dragon was the most shameless thing. Number 2, Brutalis, the fatty, was the only boss who did his job. As for number 1, Calegos, the idiot. Alright, Duque admitted that he had forgotten about him on purpose. Calegos, the new Blue Dragon King who had traveled through the future, had an interracial Palatine romance. First, he had failed in his attempt to open a well. Then, what made Duque uncomfortable was that this barbarian got together with Jaina, who had already turned into an old woman. Although in this life, Duque had already dominated Jaina in all aspects, from her spirit to her body, and with Teacher Du's various instigation and various positions to unlock, Duque was not worried that Jaina would run away. However, he still felt a little uncomfortable. In a moment of carelessness, Duke decided to correct the idiot Collego's bad hobbies for the sake of justice. The reason why the Blue Dragon clan wasn't thriving was because Collegos and his unattractive descendants were causing trouble. As a good friend, Matigosa had risked her life to enter the enemy's lair to save the dragon. How could a simple friendship explain this? It was no longer a relationship of friendship and love. Looking at her nervous expression, it was as if she wanted to die for Collegos. How could Duque bear not to fulfill such a good girl's wish? Duque opened a magic mirror, and saw that the dragon-shaped Collegos was shaking his head and letting out a low roar. Duque noticed that the big sister had clenched her hands into fists. Her nails were probably digging deep into her palms. Matigosa had not completely lost her mind. She asked nervously, "What's going on with Collegos? Is his life in danger? Where did this magic mirror image come from?" "Collegos won't die. It's just that his soul has been suppressed by the soul of a dreadlord, and is in a frenzied state. As for this magic mirror image, you have to know that the Isle of Quel'Danas used to be Sindoriai's territory, and I am the one who rebuilt the Well of the Sun. So it is normal for me to have a backup plan. Moreover, my high-ranking spies in the Burning Legion are also helping us clear a path. Collegos will be fine. As long as the army completes this teleportation, all the cards will be gathered." The confident smile on Duque's face made Matigosa feel at ease. The cooperation between Long Sleep Shrine and Duque had always been very pleasant. Ever since they worked together to kill Deathwing, Duque had never disappointed the Dragon Sleep Temple. Moreover, killing Nesaria was equivalent to avenging the Blue Dragon Legion's annihilation. In the Blue Dragon Legion, other than the bad-tempered Maligos, the other Blue Dragons had a very good impression of Duque. If it had to be described in terms of prestige, it would be a solidified worship. After the initial excessive panic and nervousness subsided, Matigosa finally remembered that this seemingly ordinary human in front of him was actually an Azeroth demigod, who was on an equal footing with the Dragon Kings. Matigosa bowed deeply. "I was too nervous just now. If my tone offended Lord Marcus, please forgive me." "It's fine." Duque waved his hand generously and glanced at Tyrande. "If my lover was caught by a demon, I would go crazy too." Big Sister Blue Dragon's face instantly turned red like a steamed prawn. She didn't notice that Tyrande had a similar expression. Tyrande really didn't know whether to feel lucky or shy. Back then, she was caught, turned around, and sent to Duque. Well, Big Sister Blue Dragon had been ignored by the players in his previous life. It could be said that her secret love had finally surfaced at this moment. Matigosa asked, "Then what should we do now?" Duque smiled. "The best hunters should learn patience. Even if we do nothing now, our hounds will still send the prey into the range of our hunting rifles." As if to prove this statement, the Sunwell was in a mess. "The first Apocalypse Guard Brigade has been wiped out. Should we send the second Apocalypse Guard Brigade? The front line says that the mortal's firepower is unexpectedly fierce, and there are traces of Draenei holy light weapons. Please advise." In the command post of the Sunwell, every Eridar warlock in charge of communication unconsciously had a tone of nervousness and panic in their words. At this time, it should be Fatiboo. Apart from him, there was no one else in the entire Sunwell who could hear the footsteps that sounded like an earthquake. Apart from him, there was a bunch of messy and heavier footsteps. The door of the hall where the command post was located suddenly opened, and Fatiboo strode in with a group of Void Lords. Behind him were 2 Apocalypse Guard Lords, 3 Darksiders, and 5 Dread Guard Lords. The Eridar Gemini only took a glance and lost interest. Due to the quality limit of the teleportation portal, only low-tier Void Lords could come this time. "Alright, it's time to attack. Gemini, You and Bonatri and Phoebus attacked the flying fleet on the sea. Penrit, you and your brothers attacked the elven coastline. At first, Fatibu was going to say what he had planned in one breath. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a smile at the corner of Aura's mouth. Fatibu was suddenly unhappy. In his eyes, the army was always invincible. If planet Azeroth did not have that damn Titan protection circle, the army would have destroyed the planet 1,000 times over. Since they came to Azeroth to farm military merits, why should they let the Gemini benefit? Brutalist changed his tone. Wait, Gemini, you should stay in the Sunwell. Those complicated magic circles are still your Eridar's forte. There was a faint look of disappointment on the Eridar Gemini's face. It was just a little bit. As drama queens, they had a good grasp of the situation. If they did not say anything, it would not be in line with their current position. If they looked too depressed, it would be too fake. While Fatibu was smiling happily, the one who was the happiest was the Gemini. Just like that, 3 Darksiders and 5 Dreadguard Lords, a total of 8 Void Lords charged out of the Sunwell, and headed straight for the Alliance's fleet. The remaining 2 Apocalypse Guard Lords charged to the defensive line on the shore. Duque chuckled, his right index finger rhythmically tapping on the armrest of his chair. Really, who gave you the courage to challenge the elites of Azeroth? Chapter 15-16. On the other side of the sea, Duque had already made arrangements. But on this side, he had originally planned to let Queen Sylvanas cooperate with Theon to deal with the Demon Lords. At this time, Duque glanced at the big sister Blue Dragon. It would be a waste not to use the hired thugs that were delivered to his doorstep. Lady Matagosa, can you deal with one of the Apocalypse Guard leaders that are attacking from the sky? The big sister Blue Dragon hurriedly bowed. It would be my honor to serve Lord Marcus, who has greatly helped the Blue Dragons. On the shoreline, the Blood Elves were a little panicked. The pressure the 2 Apocalypse Overlords gave them was too great. Low-level mysteries were destined to be defeated by high-level mysteries. Naru's Holy Light Blessing could fight demons below the level of Lord. For demons above the level of Lord, it could only be a fight between kings and generals. The Alliance's cutting-edge Holy Light Array air defense system could not break the light green magic shield around the Apocalypse Lords at all. The Blood Elves just pressed the triggers of the anti-air cannons crazily with their blood energy. In fact, it was a complete waste. Seeing that the Queen did not respond, Lord Themar and Hadron had already taken out their longbows, and were ready to attack on their dragon eagles. Near the command post in the rear, 2 thunderous dragon roars resounded and rumbled in all directions. Long live the Queen! Long live the Dragon Knights! In the open space next to the command post, 2 huge and elegant creatures spread their wings. The former fallen red dragon Varistaz and Matagosa, 1 red and 1 blue dragon, were ready to fight. Varistaz had been tricked by Nefarian, the Black Dragon Prince, and his strength could no longer return. His current strength was only at the level of an adult dragon. He could not return to the level of an ancient dragon. The dragon alone was not even as strong as Matagosa. However, the old red dragon was just a mount. If they really fought, they had to count Queen Sylvanas on his back. Queen Sylvanas' eyes were like lightning, and her face was frosty. She held the strongest epic bow in this era. Dark Bow of the Betrayer, which she had taken from the treasury of Illidan's Darkness Temple. If the bowstring was removed, this longbow would look more like a crescent moon. Apart from having the most powerful long-range attack bonus, it also had close-range combat effects. On the body of the bow, the upper and lower ends were like 2 long crescent blades. At the front of the grip, there were 3 sharp blades extending out, like the blades of a fist. The back of the grip was directly connected to a typical gauntlet. As long as Sylvanas willed it, it would become an incomparably sharp melee weapon. Under the hood, her long blonde hair slightly flowed out. Together with the black and gold-edged cloak behind her, Queen Sylvanas looked valiant and full of fighting spirit. Go! Valistaz! The old red dragon roared again and flapped his wings. Although the surrounding elven guards had long since left, the sand and stones raised when the dragons took off were still like a sandstorm, rolling up debris all over the sky. When the 2 dragons flew into the sky, debris fell like rain. Hadron and Lore, Themar looked up at the two pairs of dragon wings that covered the sky and the sun rising higher and higher. When the shadow of the dragon wings almost covered a small square, both of them slightly opened their mouths. The massive crimson dragon looked like the most gorgeous work of art. Almost every blood elf warrior was looking at the sparkling red scales under the sunlight with a look of worship. Her scales reflected the sunlight, making Queen Sylvanas look like she was enveloped in a halo of sacred and inviolable flames. As expected, Sylvanas is the true pride of us elves. Hadron's voice sounded like he was in a dream. Yeah, Lord Themar felt the same way. The two dragons and the Dragon Knight flew to the Lord of the Apocalypse and stopped 300 meters away. Queen Sylvanas raised her head and looked at the demon lord in the sky with her icy eyes. Insignificant mortals. Kneel. Ah. Queen Sylvanas was not happy with the demons of the Burning Legion. Although the mages faction was meant to be a group of traitors, and they were meant to be killed together, she was still unhappy. Queen Sylvanas pointed with her boots, and Valestas immediately understood. After being saved from the fallen, he was much weaker in a prolonged battle, and his instantaneous explosive power was not strong either. It might be a bit difficult for him to bully a beginner-level Void Lord. Don't forget that there was still Queen Sylvanas. She drew her bow and knocked an arrow. Her movements were so smooth. If Queen Sylvanas had only touched the threshold of a demigod when on Kiraj and the Sword Emperor fought, she was already half a step into the demigod realm now. Duke now had so many genuine demigods in his hands, and whenever he had the time, he would feed Queen Sylvia's moves. Other than Onyxia, who had a hard time holding back in her dragon form, the twin emperors and Vashti were the best candidates. This was especially true for Vashti, who taught Queen Sheila her thunder arrows without reservation. Therefore, when the arrow in Queen Sylvanas' hand lit up with lightning that even the sunlight couldn't cover, the Apocalypse Guard was dumbfounded. Valestas took the opportunity to pounce. His 4 dragon claws immediately suppressed the Apocalypse Guard's limbs, and his dragon mouth was about to bite the Apocalypse Guard's neck. For the Apocalypse Guard lords who had thick skin and flesh, this was not fatal. What was truly terrifying was that Queen Sylvanas, who was on the dragon's back, leaned out at this time and shot a close-range shot into the Apocalypse Guard's silly mouth. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a bang. The original position of the Apocalypse Lord's head was instantly replaced by an extremely dazzling purple-blue lightning. On the other side, while Martigosar and the other Apocalypse Lord fought fiercely, the situation on the sea also changed. At first, not many lords noticed that some mysterious power had instantly pulled the entire sea level down by tens of centimeters. Soon, a white line visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea between the fleet and the Isle of Quel'Danas. When the sea cracked and split to the left and right in a rumbling sound, a deep valley and 2 parallel waterfalls were revealed. Millions of tons of seawater poured down from the cliffs on both sides. With the help of binoculars, the Alliance soldiers could even see the situation at the bottom of the sea. In the shallow sea area that was not considered deep, a 6-armed female Naga coiled her snake tail and sat upright on a coral reef at the bottom of the sea. There was a clear mockery on her beautiful face. Azeroth is the territory of us, the Azeroth creatures. Go back to where you came from. Then, the Alliance soldiers saw a strange scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. Vash's true demigod power not only divided the 2-kilometer-long sea into 2, but also suddenly rose with her as the center. 2 huge sea tornadoes with a height of 1,000 meters suddenly rose. The huge waves immediately covered the 8 demon lords. The violent water current, with the impact of thousands of tons, forcibly pulled all the demon lords to the bottom of the sea. Chapter 15-17. When the abnormal sea surface that had been split in half became an ordinary sea surface again, the waves in front of them became turbulent. From time to time, huge shock waves could be seen, causing the surface of the sea to swell up, followed by water pillars that shot into the sky. The naval officers and soldiers of the Alliance, mainly made up of the core Tiras and Storm people, felt that their vision was a little blurry. They seemed to have seen huge aquatic monsters swim through the gaps in the fleet and rushed to the bottom of the sea. Another Alliance officer swore that he had seen giants at the bottom of the sea in the shallower waters. Hee. You don't know. That's another batch of Naga who have been reformed by Lord Marcus and pledged loyalty to the Alliance. This Storm Naga clan is stronger than the ones from back then. There's also the loyalty of the giant fish and the leader of the deep sea giants. I heard that the female Naga called Celia has the strength of a demigod. Wow. That's amazing. The Alliance soldier, who had just returned from the outer realm, boasted proudly. The recruits beside him all listened with great interest. The fierce battle at the bottom of the sea extended from the shallower areas to the even deeper trenches on the north and south sides. Soon, the churning of the sea gradually calmed down. It was unknown whether it was because the water was too deep and the fluctuations below could not affect the surface of the sea, or because the battle had come to an end. In Sindoriai's command post, Tyron sighed softly. You've really picked up a big bargain. A dignified demigod brought so many powerful subordinates to stick to you. The corners of Duque's mouth twitched. He was instead interested in sensing the battle underwater with the magic net. In the deep sea, observing the enemy with the naked eye was a joke. When the turbulence of the elements and the deliberately muddy water mixed together, the demon lords who were not familiar with underwater battles were destined to end tragically. Moreover, only the top high-ranked void lords could withstand a demigod powerhouse, and it had to be in a relatively advantageous terrain. The sea was the home field of the Nagas. As long as N'Zoth did not come out to cause trouble, Vashj was almost invincible. N'Zoth would not dare to come out. After all, Vashj was only dealing with a few low-ranked void lords who did not have eyes. It could not be considered as using her full strength. Moreover, the Alliance's side, Duque and Elun had not really made a move yet. If he ran out to ambush Vashj, it would be equivalent to foolishly taking the blame for the Alliance targeting Kil'jaeden. The most cunning N'Zoth would certainly not do such a good thing at his own expense. Duke didn't intend to let Vashj go all out. She and the leaders of Serpent Temple were here to hold the fort. To be honest, small matters such as beating up the Demon Lord could be left to the three leaders, Yesler, Morogrim Tidewalker and the unstable Hydas. Apart from the initial move to pull the Demon Lord down, Vashj was just watching the show. Even the Deepwater Lord, Karathras, just stayed by her side to guard. Above the water surface of the outer circle of the Isle of Quel'Danas, after Queen Sylvie dealt with the Doomsday Lord, she directly drove the red dragon to circle around the outer circle of the island. Now, her thunder arrows could guarantee that within 1,000 meters, any enemy that was commander tier or below that appeared in her field of view would be instantly killed. Once upon a time, they were obsessed with using magic to destroy the enemy. Now, it seemed that this kind of violent and beautiful chain of arrows was equally exciting. Originally, Queen Vashj's attack power was limited by the number of arrows. Ever since Queen Vashj broke through, she began to turn to elemental control. Now, unless it was a strong enemy, she would not use the arrows in the quiver on her back. Instead, she would condense lightning into arrows to kill the enemy. In the Sunwell, Fatty Boo's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The invincible Burning Legion lord in his heart, and the air force that he was so proud of were all killed in a few rounds. It was a slap to the left and then the right. He had no interest in recruiting more demon lords. The size of the portal limited the level of the lords that could come. Continuing to pull people over at this stage was more like giving experience to those insignificant mortals. Gemini, if there are more cannonballs coming, fly up and shoot them down. We'll bear with it and switch to a strategic defense. After the portal expands, Gemini had no choice but to obey Fatty Boo's order. When the Alliance's cannonballs came again, more than 100 Eridar warlocks flapped their wings and slowly flew into the sky with Gemini. They hid in the well of the sun magic array and fired at the cannonballs that were flying toward them. This was like the dense cannons used by modern warships before Duque traveled through time. They used a dense barrage as a line of defense to block the incoming cannonballs. Since the Sunwell had an almost endless supply of magic, the magic circle was not afraid of elemental magic attacks. They only needed to focus on the incoming cannonballs. For a moment, it seemed that the effect was not bad. In the command center, Duque smiled. The effect is not bad. Pass the order. Begin the landing battle. With the order, the Alliance's fleet on the sea and in the sky became lively. First, the cannons no longer targeted the Sunwell Highlands. Instead, they focused on the landing point at the beach. A place that looked empty did not mean it was a safe zone. Using the cannons once would at least give them peace of mind. The 203mm cruiser's main cannons were aimed at Yongwan Port in the north of the island, while the 400mm and above were all sent to the buildings in the middle of the island, as well as the Magister's platform in the northeast. That was once that's palace. Although there was no special meaning to bombing there, when Du had traveled through time, he could not farm the famous white chocobo on the Magister's platform no matter how hard he tried. Du, with his dark heart, just let it go, Servanas sighed to himself as he flew in the sky. With this, the mage's backbone would probably be completely broken. Since ancient times, the most terrifying thing was to break the legacy. Without the historical texts and architectural relics needed to carry the legacy, there would be no cultural core. It should be said that this was the inevitable outcome of the High Elves and High Elves who crazily pursued the secrets of magic by hook or by crook. After the cannons covered a circle, thousands of murlocs, surged ashore. As the unquestionable cannon fodder of the vassal races, it was naturally the murlocs whose lives were worthless to land on the beach to explore the way and deal with mines. In fact, the effect of the cannons was not very good. Those who died were basically demonized half-elves. The true Burning Legion demons did not suffer great losses. Their resistance was also seen by Vashj. Chapter 15:18. The scene of thousands of Nagas swaying their long snake tails, surging from the bottom of the sea to the shallows, and then quickly landing gave the Alliance a sense of shock. It was hard to imagine what it would be like if they encountered so many Nagas when they landed. Not to mention the old-fashioned wooden boats. Even the landing ships that Duque had drawn and built would die if they encountered the Nagas. The mainstream races of the Alliance, such as humans, were still helpless against large-scale underwater battles. Druids turning into seals. Well, many elite druids had died in Zangermarsh last time, and Fandral Staghelm was still extremely resentful. He said that Duque would have been fine if he had kept Vashj long ago. In the 25 years since the Dark Portal, the Alliance had abandoned wooden warships and switched to new warships made of steel. Although they looked ugly, the increase in defense and survivability was real. Amphibious warships that could hold landing ships at the stern were also built. However, the new diesel boiler engine still had various problems, which was also an inevitable byproduct of rapid development. However, they did not use the dock and directly transported the new tanks to the beach. Once the Alliance commanders tasted this kind of forceful flattening, they could not bear to part with it. Not only Yongwan Port, but there were landing ships landing in other directions on the Isle of Quel'Danas. At the place closest to the elven homeland, Arthas had directly frozen the harbor and walked there. Now that the Alliance had been prepared, after suppressing the counterattack of the demons, they first sent out the boats stored in the cellar near the old site of Silvermoon City, and then had the engineers set up pontoon bridges. With the paladins of the Silver Hand Knights as the vanguard, they launched a charge. The Alliance had begun a large-scale counterattack, and the Burning Legion would not be idle. From the ready-made teleportation portals, demons of all levels continuously poured out. Under the orders of the frontline commanders, they began to counterattack the Alliance on the beach. In several places, the murlocs were simply harvested by the demons like cutting grass. If it were not for the Nagas, the murlocs would have collapsed long ago. The loss of cannon fodder at the front ensured that the losses of the Alliance warriors would not be too high. The flames of war spread throughout the entire Isle of Quel'Danas. At the same time, a little bit next to the center of the Sunwell, there was finally a surge of terrifying energy that could penetrate the sky and earth. A golden pillar of light shot straight into the sky, shattering all the clouds in the sky. Then a faint destructive aura rippled out. It was like the smell of a volcanic eruption, similar to sulfur full of scorching heat. Along with the scorching heat, there was also a familiar evil aura, the demonic aura of the highest level of demons. He could totally imagine Kill Jaden already waiting on the other side of the portal. In the command post, the Alliance leader was in a video conference. Duque held his chin with one hand and said with a faint smile, "Has it finally begun?" Then, Duque glanced at Matagosa, who had already dealt with his opponent and returned. Looking at that restless face, Duque said, "Looks like you won't wait too long. How about this? You have to swear the Dragon King's oath that you can only fight in your human form. Only then will I be able to let you in." "Why?" Matagosa asked. Duque snapped his fingers, and a three-dimensional map of the Sunwell Highland appeared in front of everyone. This is the latest information. The entire Sunwell Highland had actually been enhanced by an extremely powerful spatial magic array. There's only one way to get in. Jaina, who was in the magic mirror, asked. "Even you can't break a way out?" "It's not that I can't, but it'll be very dangerous. This is an extremely clever reinforcement based on the protective magic array that the Sunwell has been building for thousands of years. Be it the Sunwell or the Well of Eternity, they're essentially elemental energy overflowing from the planet Azeroth. The so-called bottle of water from the Well of Eternity, turning into the Sunwell, is just a prelude. Forcibly destroying this array is very likely to mean another big explosion." Duque's words made all the leaders feel a little uneasy. 10,000 years ago, the Well of Eternity was blown up, and as a result, the mainland collapsed. What about this time? Apart from Queen Sylvie, who was fighting outside, the three Windrunner sisters were all nervous. Duque shrugged. "Once the Sunwell explodes, at least the mainland of Sindorii will be finished. It might even affect Rotterdam. Of course, I reckon it probably won't blow up New Rotterdam, but Stratholme is a little dangerous." The Alliance leader's scalp went numb, and he jumped up. "If it's so dangerous, why did you have to use the Sunwell as bait?" Aurelia said, "First of all, how to deal with the Sunwell is the internal affairs of the Sindorii kingdom. The Alliance has no right to interfere. Secondly, I reckon Duque didn't expect it to turn out like this." Duque went with the flow. "I didn't know the Burning Legion's spatial magic would be so terrifying either. Magic is indeed a very deep subject. Even I, a demigod of the weave, can't understand it." Duque glanced at the big sister blue dragon. "Okay, speaking of which, because of the spatial magic array, the space in the Sunwell is very limited. According to the intelligence, the blue dragon Kalegos is guarding the first pass. The space there really isn't big." As Duque brought up the circular platform where the first elder of the Sunwell was, Matagosa frowned. It was a place with a diameter of less than 300 meters. For humans, it was indeed a large square. For dragons, it couldn't meet the needs of battle at all. If Kalegos went crazy, Matagosa would have to transform to stop him. Then, this place would turn into a hand-to-hand battle without any skills. Only the one with the strongest vitality and defense would survive. This was something Matagosa definitely didn't want to see. At this moment, Duque clapped his hands and attracted everyone's attention again. "Kalegos isn't our enemy. He's just being controlled. So, what we really have to deal with is the soul of the dread demon king that has possessed him. I'll have to trouble everyone to rehearse later." Not long after, the leaders of the Alliance, who were also the strongest people in the country, walked out of the portal. Duque had Matagosa transform into a dragon on the prepared field, and let everyone rehearse how to move and find the portal. This was a battle where they switched between two worlds. Basically, if the strategy was correct, they would beat up Kalegos first. Then, the delirious guy would open a portal and let the heroes enter a dark inner world to beat up the main character, Sesovar. Duque didn't participate in this battle. Firstly, it would be embarrassing for a demigod to beat up Kalegos, who wasn't even an ancient dragon. Secondly, he really wasn't confident that he could get his main body to enter the nightmare space. Chapter 1519. The demigod's spiritual power was so powerful that it might even blow up Kalegos' spiritual world. It would not be good if the Blue Dragon King, who was supposed to be the backup, became retarded. Speaking of which, to be controlled by a mere dreadlord, Kalegos was quite a scumbag. Do you want to see if Uther can be easily controlled? Even though there were two famous cases of control in history, Sidan Dathrahan was defeated by the Dreadlord after he was left alone, and his body was controlled after he died. Alexandros Mograine was killed by his son's betrayal, which was why he was controlled. Arthas' worldview was destroyed by a series of conspiracies, and he finally fell. How could he be controlled like Kalegos as soon as he entered the arena? It couldn't be helped. Duque didn't like the Blue Dragon King Malygos. In case Malygos courted death like he did in history, he had to leave some seeds for the Blue Dragons. Sigh. Who told me to be a good person? Duke took out a small seed and handed it to Matagosa. In order to prevent Kalegos from becoming an idiot due to the damage to his mind. If you see anything wrong with the collapse of the Dreadlord's mind, just throw the seed in. This will at least ensure that Kalegos won't become an idiot. The big sister Blue Dragon accepted it solemnly. Thank you for your generosity, Lord Marcus. No one had ever dared to have high hopes for the Burning Legion's captives. Demons had plenty of ways to torture their captives. But a little more hope was always good. After all, their king had already told Kalegos to go shit. They could only rely on this demigod in front of them who had a good relationship with the dragons. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, Duke said, "Yes, Matagosa, you like Kalegos, don't you?" The big sister blushed and stammered, Actually, that we are very, very good friends." She didn't dare to say that she had a crush, and it was too light to say that they were friends. In the end, they became very, very good friends. Duque was speechless at the thought of how two dragons could be so shy when talking about feelings. "All right, do you allow help you?" Duque seemed to hesitate for 2 seconds before saying, "Actually, I know that Kalegos is a little eccentric. He prefers human females, or at least females with the appearance of a human female. Why don't you change into a human woman's appearance for me to see?" His instincts still wanted to deny it, but in the end, Matagosa was still bewitched. He activated the ultimate transformation spell, and turned into a human female. The contours of the face can be softer here, and the corners of the eyes can be slightly elongated. With Duque's instigation, it was as if he had become the most awesome plastic surgeon in the world. In the end, he made Matagosa look like an intermediate version of Anvina and Jaina. Will he really like my appearance? Yes, that's right. I bet on it. I'm sure Kalegos will like you very much after you save him. Really? I'm sure. All right, time to go, let's go. Matagosa, save Kalegos. Then fulfill your dream. Then Matagosa really ran off to prepare for the attack. This scene stunned Tyrant and the other onlookers at the side. How did the great cause of fighting against the Burning Legion become a blind date? Duque's words scared the leaders of the alliance. Don't be fooled by Kalegos' funny face. He's a blue dragon with the potential to become a dragon king. Of course, he's not as good as Malygos, but we have to be prepared. The planetary protection array formed by the 5-colored dragon kings must not be lost. Killing the Wing of Death, Nesario, in advance resulted in the direct weakening of the planet's defense array. This evil consequence had long been reflected. In the past 10,000 years, the array had been weakened. Fortunately, Duque had coaxed Onyxia to work recently. Although she was still not as good as the real Black Dragon King Nesario, at least she had reassembled the 5-colored Dragon Kings. It was better than when there were only 4 Dragon Kings left. Otherwise, when the pressure increased, it would be easy for them to collapse. In history, it was also when the few Dragon Kings were almost dead that the Burning Legion launched a full-scale invasion and used interstellar battleships to parachute in. In the following time, the Eridar Gemini used more energy from the Sunwell to strengthen the protective array of the Sunwell. If they wanted to break an opening, they had to crack the magic array very close to the gate. This was not easy. The Burning Legion's resistance was very fierce. The Alliance had reached the beachhead, but every inch of land had to be fought over repeatedly. There were a few space portals in the Sunwell, and elite demons were continuously sent over. If not for the paladins at the front line and the fleet's crazy support with holy light cannons, the old Alliance might have suffered great losses. After all, it was a battle that had to be fought with human lives regardless of whether they could win or not. In history, it was the Dreenii led by Willan who formed the Shattered Sun military organization and attacked the demons of the Legion with all their might. After all, in that period of history, The human paladins had declined a little, and there were not many capable powerhouses. But in this life, there were too many changes. The paladins at the front line were still the paladins, but now there were three. The human Silver Hand led by Tyrion Fordring, the Draenei paladins led by Garrison Officer Merritt, and the Blood Elf paladins led by Countess Riataline. The three paladins took turns to attack. Together with the elite infantry of the Alliance, the rangers trained by the Windrunner family, and the Dalajan mages, the battle was truly spectacular. On the battlefield, the Alliance seemed to have suffered heavy casualties. In reality, Alliance soldiers could be seen dragging their comrades back. As long as they did not die on the spot, the priests could basically save them. After 7 days of continuous attacks, not a single Alliance army lost more than 20% of its people. However, although the front line was very lively, this was actually a low-intensity war. This was because the Lord-level demons never stepped out of the magic array of the Sunwell again. Even the newly teleported demon lords all hid in the magic array and did not come out. A group of demon lords blocked the door. Even if the magic array was forcibly opened, ordinary troops would not be able to rush in. In fact, everyone was waiting for Duque's orders, but Duque was waiting for the progress of Kill Jaden's arrival. This formed a strange situation. Counting from the time the Sunwell was taken, when the sun rose on the horizon on the 7th day, the flying fortress Naxxramas arrived. Attack with all your strength and put some pressure on the egg. Chapter 15:20. The principle of the magic protection circle was more like a kind of energy counteracting. As the largest energy overflow point of planet Azeroth, it was extremely difficult for normal magic to break through the magic defense of the Sunwell Highland. Duque could do it, but unfortunately the investment was not proportional to the results. It was too much of a waste for him to use the magic net's energy to fight the overflow of energy from the entire planet. He had a simpler and less troublesome way. And that was Naxxramas. Why did Fadibu capture the Eridar Gemini to use as an anti-air cannon? It was because it was not worth it to use energy to counteract mass and explosion. The magic of the Sunwell Highland did not just supply the shield. Most of the energy flowed into the summoning circle on the side of the Sunwell. Seeing Naxxramas arrive, Fadibu was also dumbfounded. The Eridar Gemini shrugged, indicating that they could not handle a Titan relic of this size. Fadibu did not say anything else. Follow the plan. Defend the main road. Almost from the moment the demons of the Sunwell saw Naxxramas enter their field of vision, Duque clearly felt that the evil energy overflowing from the Sunwell had become stronger. Others might only have a simple feeling that the summoning ritual might have been accelerated. But how much was added was just a feeling. On Duque's retina, there was a clear linear chart, and the energy storage of the Sunwell was decreasing. In addition, the system elf had been analyzing the magic circle pattern sent back by the Gemini 24 hours a day, judging its function and endurance limit, and had basically come to a conclusion. Duque's lips curled into a mysterious smile. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to attack. But I have a small request. First, you must advance step by step, very cautiously, and spend an hour on the road to reach Collegos. Then it will take 30 minutes to save Collegos. This way, you will be able to conserve your strength to deal with the next burst of speed. If the person who said this was not Duque, the leaders would have probably gone up and slapped him a few times. If possible, of course, everyone wanted to smoothly deal with the demons of the Burning Legion. Battles were always full of surprises. No one could guarantee that the other party did not have any trump cards. But Duque had quantified the unpredictable battle. He opened his palm, and a 3D image of the Sunwell Highland appeared in front of everyone. From the outer garden, to the long and narrow corridor, to the place where the leaders fought, every enemy's appearance, ability effects, range, and even vitality were accurately marked out. As for the so-called vitality assessment, everyone was only skeptical about it. But seeing that the spy's intelligence was so reliable, everyone could only lament in their hearts. If they had successfully tricked Kill Jaden this time, then the egg would not have lost unjustly. Everyone received the order, and gathered most of the Alliance experts to enter. Apart from Duque and his direct subordinates, Vashti, Aurelia and Sasha, who were still pregnant, were unable to participate. The rest were all present. There was nothing much to say about the process of beating up Kalegos. The current Kalegos was at the level of an adult dragon, not even an ancient dragon. In terms of strength and difficulty, there was no way he could compare to the strengthened version of the fallen Veristas in Blackwing's nest. What's more, his admirer, Madagosa, was holding the fort. If they couldn't even win against him, then the Alliance's powerhouses should all hang themselves. Who am I? Where am I? What did I do? Kalegos, who had finally regained his senses, was still confused. In order to reduce the consumption of his body, he had turned into a blue-haired young man. Fortunately, there was a familiar dragon like Madagosa beside him, so Kalegos quickly calmed down. Madagosa, you changed your appearance? For some reason, Kalegos looked at Madagosa, who had transformed into a human, and suddenly felt that she was very pleasing to the eye. Can I touch you? Looking at Kalegos's outstretched hand, Madagosa could not help but be overjoyed. Yes, if you want to touch. She had thrown in what Duque had given her a long time ago. Although she felt that she was in danger of riding a dragon, she quickly relaxed. The relationship between dragons was a little simple and crude. If they liked each other, they would communicate when they were in heat. After that, the male dragon would scram to wherever he wanted to go. The crude male dragons were not in the mood to raise their offspring. Taking care of the children was the female dragon's job. Once the young dragons passed the youngest fledgling stage and grew into young dragons, they would have to scram. After all, with the Dragon Slumber Temple backing them, there were really not many people in this world who dared to bully young dragons. To put it bluntly, young dragons were very powerful. 99% of the time, young dragons were already very lucky not to bully other intelligent races. The Alliance's performance was so strong that the demons in the Sunwell were a little flustered. One had to know that Kill Jaden's original order was to hold on for another 8 hours. It had only been 1.5 hours, and the first guardian, Kalegos, had been defeated. Fatibu asked softly, Lord Kil'jaeden, should we use a portion of the Sunwell's energy to teleport a few high-level Void Lords over first? A cold snort came from the other side of the portal. Useless guy. I knew you guys were unreliable. It's fine. Duke Marcus is scheming against me, and I'm also scheming against him. He thinks he can stop me when I'm halfway over. Does he really think he can predict Eridar's most exquisite teleportation spell? When he comes over, I'll already be in my complete form. Go. Brutalis, as long as you hold on for another half an hour, it will be a complete victory for the Burning Legion. As the voice trailed off, 2 huge red palms with sharp black nails suddenly reached out from the portal. The size of the red palms was so large that it looked like it could easily squeeze a lightweight light tank in its hands like a fitness ball. The palms were trying to pry open the portal that was originally only 10 meters in diameter. The sound of the dimensional barrier cracking and tearing echoed throughout the hall. However, the Eridar twins who were waiting at the entrance of the hall were shocked to find that they did not feel any increase in the dark energy overflowing from the hall. This was the scary thing about Kil'jaeden. In terms of perception, it was like an old bull starting to drag a cart and slowly accelerate. In fact, Kil'jaeden was already whipping the horse, completing the construction of the portal at the speed of the warhorse's sprint. This move of the Burning Legion's commander shocked every demon present. To be able to instantly release a terrifying power that could tear a large area of space apart in a mere hall. How powerful must one's control over space be? They really wanted to say that what they saw and heard were all illusions. But right now, the massive energy of the Sunwell was under their surveillance, turning into specks of light that dissipated into the teleportation magic circle. There was really no way to fake it. Chapter 1521. Just Kil'jaeden's ability to overturn rivers and seas and shatter space was enough to make the Eridar twins unable to resist. For a moment, they saw each other's shock and hesitation. Their previous decision to rely on Duque now seemed a little wrong. The desperate situation they were in the Burning Legion made betrayal seem like an inevitable thing. However, if the result of betrayal was absolute destruction, then the greedy twins would rather continue to be the lowliest maggots in the Legion than have the slightest thought of betrayal. Unfortunately, it was too late. Kill Jaden was terrifying, and Duke Marcus was no saint. If they retreated at the last moment, Duque would never let them go. It was Duque who forced them to betray him. Once they betrayed their boss, even if Azeroth was destroyed, Duque would drag them down with him. Moreover, demons did not accept betrayal. If betrayal could be easily forgiven, then there would be more betrayers swarming out. So Kill Jaden would never let them off just because they confessed. After Nazul's betrayal, Kill Jaden was very sensitive to the word betrayal. Even when he mentioned Nazul, his demeanor was full of madness. In any case, there was no turning back. The twins bowed their heads deeply, trembling to show their awe of Kill Jaden's boundless power. This was how they should behave after being deprived of their status as feudal lords. What should be done had been done. The rest was up to their new boss, Duque. In the empty command post, Duque received the latest news. It was not from the twins, but from his early arrangements. As a transmigrator, he knew that sooner or later the Sunwell would be messed up by the egg, so of course he had a backup plan. The Elven Queen was his own harem, so it was normal to add something in the name of renovation. It was the simplest passive detection, a dark energy crystal that would react differently according to the concentration of dark energy. From the inside to the outside, Duque had personally controlled the mirror image avatar to set up 30 circuits. Almost as soon as Kill Jaden exerted his power, Duque received it and sent the order to the front line on the spot. Kill Jaden was well prepared. He knew that Duque was scheming against him. At first, his progress was slow and he didn't even show up. When he saw that it was about time, he suddenly exerted his strength. If not for these arrangements, Duque would really have been deceived by him. What surprised Duque was that 2 minutes later, he received an urgent message from Gemini. Furthermore, it was specifically stated that it had happened 2 minutes ago, so there was at most 28 minutes left. Duque grinned. It seems that the Demon Sisters are going all out. Since you have truly acknowledged me as your master, I will not disappoint you. If the alliance didn't succeed, they would also die along with it. They didn't care if they would be discovered or not. Gemini almost risked her life to send a message. Just as the hero group was about to reach Fatibou, they received a messenger from Duque. It was a very special messenger. When the messenger used his strong arms to lift his cloak, Imriel was dumbfounded. She could recognize this guy even if it took her a long time to do so. Years ago, when he destroyed Shatrath City, his strength and brutality were incomparably famous in the entire Drenii circle. He was none other than Master Howl, Grom Hellscream. For a moment, Imriel almost jumped on the spot. But she immediately realized that this Lord Howl was not a living person. His explosive muscle lines were clearly visible, and the details of the beard and tooth ornaments on his face were meticulously detailed. Imriel could even feel the surging blood vessels under his green skin, as well as the heat coming out of his thick nostrils. But he was definitely not a living beast man. His body was too perfect. There was not a trace of sweat or dirt on him, and his overly pure arcane energy waves told others that he was an elemental creature. You really came. The one who spoke was Tyrion Fordring. He was a powerhouse of the Alliance who fought on the front lines since World War II. He had the right to speak to Lord Howl. Beast men keep their words. Lord Howl replied firmly. Tyrion smiled. I know. You don't fight for the Alliance, but for Duke Marcus's kindness. Lord Howl nodded, but looked like he was unwilling to say another word. Tyrion smiled unconcerned. The powerhouses of the Alliance all showed similar kind smiles and made way for him. Queen She even nodded at him. Grom was stunned, but he still nodded in return. Seeing this scene, Imriel's curiosity was about to explode. Why would a heroic beast man be so respected by the Alliance? At this moment, Kalia tugged at her hand. Imriel, Grom made many mistakes, but he was a real man of responsibility, and he was an out-and-out hero. When he was alive, he was indeed a tribal chief, but after his death, he was only loyal to Duque to repay a debt of gratitude. Kalia quickly gave a brief introduction about Lord Howl. She finally understood. Grom had died last month. At the age of 60, This was unimaginable among beastman warriors. No beastman warrior could fight their whole life and die peacefully in their own bed. Usually, only a respectable shaman could have such an ending. Although there were dissenting opinions among the beastmen that Grom should have died on the battlefield like a true beastman, Thrall stood his ground and gave Grom a grand burial. He also publicly announced that Grom would keep his promise to repay Duque and not become a Death Knight to continue serving the tribe. This caused a huge controversy among the beastmen, and even the entire tribe. Then there was Lord Howl, who appeared in the Alliance's hero group. The wise leader of the Alliance had already figured out why. To kill Fatibou quickly and without scaring Kill Jaden away, Grom was definitely the best candidate. In the entire Alliance and even the Burning Legion, everyone knew Lord Howl's nickname, the Bane of the Lords of the Abyss. To be able to kill the Lord of the Abyss, one of the main races of the Burning Legion, Lord Howl was the only one in the world. It wasn't an assassination, but a head-on confrontation. Against the Lords of the Abyss, Lord Howl always used an axe. I alone am enough, Grom said. Then, the powerhouses of the Alliance put away their swords, as if they were watching a show. Brutalis is a high-level Lord of the Void, Iril said softly. She had said it for Kalia to hear. But who knew that Lord Howl would hear it? Lord Howl glared at Hoof, and suddenly, Hoof felt as if he had been hit by petrifying gaze, and couldn't say a word. A body that surpasses my peak at 18 years old, and 60 years of battle experience. If I can't even deal with an Lord of the Abyss, Grom Hellscream doesn't have the right to continue existing in this world. Chapter 1522. Lord Roar was full of himself. To be honest, this was the complete opposite of the humility of the Alliance's mainstream chivalry. Chivalry emphasized humility, while Orc warriors sought to be flamboyant. If they hadn't known each other for more than 20 years, someone might have really talked back to Lord Roar. However, they had worked together in Molten Core, Blackwing's Nest, and Mount Hyjal. The tacit understanding between them made the Alliance powerhouses smile at each other. Duque told me to finish that guy in 10 minutes. Excluding the small talk just now, there are only 5 minutes left. Although Grom said this, no one saw the urgency on his face. This was a powerhouse, a top-notch powerhouse with absolute confidence in his martial arts and combat ability. If he had had such an opportunity when he was alive, he might have been able to break through the boundaries of the divine realm and enter the demigod realm. Now this path wasn't blocked. However, he didn't have the unparalleled skill, so Duque definitely couldn't let him advance to the demigod realm first. After leaving the palace where they defeated Calegos, they walked through a roof corridor that wasn't too long. It was about the height of 3 stories, and they would arrive at a huge gap. The huge Brutalis was already waiting in the vast empty space in front of them. According to the original plan, everyone had to jump down from the gap in the palace to fight Fatibou. Insignificant mortals. You've dawdled for so long, and you're finally willing to die? The Lord of the Abyss was like a small mountain. No matter when he looked at it, it was always so oppressive. However, Lord Roar didn't care. So what if you have a lower body like a dragon? So what if you have a mouth full of fangs? Can you still scare me after your arms are modified? Master Howl single-handedly held his world-famous killing weapon, the battle-axe Bloodhowl. The battle-axe, which resembled a curved nose, seemed to be humming because its owner had surpassed his own limits. The crimson glow on the blade of the battle-axe continued to shine. Looking at Fatibou, who was arrogantly mocking the Alliance's hero group, Lord Roar grinned. Idiot, after I chop your head off, I'll let you talk all you want. Grom slowly changed his posture. It was very close to the position of squatting in the toilet, but his upper body was straight, which made him look weird. Although it looked a little funny, no one in the Alliance underestimated this posture. At this moment, Grom moved. In front of the vigilant Fatibou, Grom shot out like a spring that had been pulled to its limit. Using the height of a 3-story building, Grom jumped a height that mortals couldn't even reach in pole vaulting. Grom, who was no longer a mortal, jumped 10 stories in one go. When he reached the height limit of his high jump, his whole body tilted downwards and his feet up. With a fierce stare, The arcane energy that appeared in the void became his stepping stone. Immediately, his whole body shot towards Fatty Boo like a cannonball. Even the experienced and knowledgeable Fatty Boo was falling at an incredible speed. It was as if a star had fallen from the sky. The Lords of the Abyss were born with huge and bloated bodies, and it was destined that they would never be able to dodge. No matter what kind of attack it was, he had to take it head-on. Brutalist raised his modified arms. His right arm, which was equipped with a double-edged sword, and his left arm, which was equipped with a serrated machete, formed an X shape, firmly blocking Grom's path of descent. Who knew that Lord Howl, who had become an arcane energy creature, had agility that he definitely didn't have when he was alive? In the blink of an eye, when Lord Howl landed in front of Fatty Boo's double-edged sword, he suddenly rolled forward 3 times, dangerously changing his path of descent, and went over from the top of the X shape. Faced with Grom's snake-like movements, the anxious Fatty Boo swung his arms upwards. He wanted to kill Grom in midair. When the powerful swings that cut through the air attacked Grom with unimaginable destructive power, Fatty Boo saw the orc hero's rugged face and smiled mockingly. Thunderstrike. Although Grom had used a skill unique to warriors, Fatty Boo was still shocked to see Grom stretch out his legs to kick the double-edged sword. His legs, which looked extremely slender, had actually kicked the huge sword that was more than 10 times heavier. Under normal circumstances, even with the protection of the epic ranked leg armor, Shifang's legs should have broken under his powerful attack. Even if he had miraculously blocked it, he would still have been sent flying by the powerful force. Fatty Boo's attack didn't break Grom's legs, but it didn't feel easy to send him flying either. Instead, it felt like a premeditated self-rebound. Sure enough, Grom suddenly used another warrior skill, Intercept, after he was sent flying for less than 2 meters. He turned into a flash of green light and rushed towards the defenseless Fatty Boo's chest at lightning speed. Half of Fatty Boo's vision was suddenly filled with the domineering Grom. He couldn't block it. He definitely couldn't block it. Even though Brutalist believed in the defensive ability of his breastplate, he didn't want to believe that this little orc could kill him with an axe. However, Manarotha's mistake always stimulated his nerves. After all, Grom Hellscream was a terrifying existence that had killed a Lord of the Abyss with an axe. At the last moment, Fatty Boo shrank back and tried his best to lean back, hoping that he could dodge Lord Howl's axe. Compared to the retreating Fatty Boo, Lord Howl's attack was faster. He combined the momentum of falling from the sky with all the strength in his body, burning all his anger for an attack. It could be described as a meteor. The holy light was the power of the clergy's will, and so was the anger of a warrior. With a red flash that looked like a prairie fire, Grom's body accelerated a second time, and the destructive power of the axe increased at an unimaginable speed. In the next moment, the ear-piercing sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out in the empty grassland. It was the sound of a battleship being split in half by an axe. To everyone's surprise, the special alloy breastplate on Brutalist's chest that was at least a meter thick exploded into countless pieces. The crimson blood roar accurately slashed Fatty Boo's chest. Fatty Boo's expression of disbelief and fear was the background of the scene. Impossible. Idiot. I only used 1 axe strike against your boss. Do you think I'll use a second strike against you? Grom's face was filled with absolute pride. Brutalist's body began to convulse. The Lord of the Abyss was indeed powerful, but the entire race was the same. Those who were weaker than them would definitely not be able to defeat them, but those who were slightly stronger could definitely take care of them. There was not the slightest bit of uncertainty. The blood-red color spread throughout Fatty Boo's body. Just by looking at his appearance, one could imagine the scene of the Lord of the Abyss burning from the inside out. In a trance, Imriel felt as if she could smell burning flesh. Chapter 1523. Brutalist, who was as huge as a small mountain, let out a final scream. His bloated body, which was originally supported by 4 legs that were thicker than elephant legs, suddenly fell to the ground. Strangely, it didn't fall like most monsters. Perhaps because its lower body was too bloated, it actually looked like a roly-poly doll. Its 4 hooves were loosened, and its lower abdomen was on the ground. Its upper body was limp, and it tilted its head to the side. Oh! Pulling out Bloodhowl. Lord Howl stood on Bupang's shoulder with one foot and stepped on the side of Bupang's face. He let out a howl that was full of orc characteristics. Barbaric, rough, and extremely morale-boosting. He was shouting for his new life, for himself to surpass the peak. Hero's Age. How many times had he been ashamed of his weakness in the last battle? How many times had he endured the scorn and provocation of young orcs, without being able to retaliate? Grom didn't want to admit that he was old. And he didn't want to announce that his passion as a warrior had cooled. Today he finally found the feeling of charging into the battlefield, and letting go of himself. Following his heart, and not losing his friends was the life he wanted to live. The heroes of the Alliance were stunned at first. Then, led by Tyrion, many people began to applaud. Tyrion even felt a little envious of Grom. The decline brought by aging was becoming more and more obvious. He remembered when the 5 Silver Saints first appeared. They were all young people around 20 years old. In the blink of an eye, 25 years had passed, and Tyrion was almost 50 years old. Sometimes he couldn't help but wonder if he should learn from the queens and Grom and follow Duque. After all, eternal life and eternal youth were temptations that mortals couldn't resist. However, Tyrion immediately chased this thought out of his mind. The path of the holy light didn't allow for any distracting thoughts. If there came a day when the world needed him to do this, he would do it. Otherwise, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. This was the path of the holy light. Grom really killed a high-tier Void Lord with one swing of his axe. This scene shocked Imrian. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that when an orc hero like Grom was on his side, the feeling of killing an enemy was completely different. Is Grom Hellscream the strongest? Imriel muttered to himself. At some point, Queen Sylvanas walked to her side. You're just the best at single-target attacks, but you're good at dealing with meat shields like the Lord of the Abyss. It was rare for another leader to talk to him, so Imriel quickly asked, is there anything else? Don't be too envious of him. Everyone had their own characteristics. Although Grom was ferocious, if he encountered an agile opponent or someone who was good at using mirror clones, such as Duque, he would lose. Grom's only fate is to be dragged to death. Queen Sylvie briefly mentioned how she and her sister worked together to deal with Grom in Southshore. No matter how high his attack power was, it would be a waste of stamina if he missed. Grom's single target damage was extremely high. Even if there were too many of them, they wouldn't be able to deal with him. On the contrary, weapons like Ashbringer were very suitable for mass destruction. It could be said that everyone's unique characteristics determined the type of battle they fought. Just then Magni Bronzebeard hit the floor with his hammer. Since no one has lost anything, let's continue. The Alliance powerhouses understood tacitly, and continued to move forward with ease. 2 battles in a row didn't consume too much energy. In the first battle, Matagosa put in the most effort. After saving Calegos, she retreated with her dragon. In the second battle, Lord Howl called it a day, and everyone became a spectator. It could be said that the Alliance powerhouses were at most warming up. They had the ability and reason to continue advancing. At this time, the problem was thrown to Kil'jaeden. The gatekeepers of the 2 checkpoints were taken down so easily. This unexpected situation shocked Kil'jaeden. His eyes widened and his eyeballs rolled twice. As a master conspirator, Egg obviously felt the smell of conspiracy. This result was normal. After all, the Alliance didn't use any god-level combat power. In Kil'jaeden's eyes, it was just like chickens pecking at each other. However, the Alliance seemed to be better at dealing with him. It was understandable that it was abnormal, because the rhythm was too coincidental. He sped up the teleportation. Although he tried to cover it up, the Alliance seemed to have sped up to match his speed. Conspirators didn't believe in coincidences. It wasn't impossible to continue with the plan, but in order to be safe, he had to get a reputable high-level Void Lord to hold the fort, and it had to be a strong fighter who could fight against a demigod. This way, he had to delay the opening of the ultimate portal. Gamble? Or not gamble? This was a big problem. There were only 2 paths to choose. Kil'jaeden was sinister, cunning, cruel, and heartless, but he wasn't a hot-blooded fool. In these 10 seconds, his brain calculated countless possibilities and ways to deal with it. What motivated him was his infinite confidence in himself and the absolute dignity of a powerhouse. I am Kil'jaeden, the leader of the Burning Legion. I have never been defeated on countless battlefields. I have destroyed thousands of planets and made billions of living beings cry in despair. Sargeras and Archimonde's failure doesn't equal my failure. The Burning Legion has been shamed too much recently. There must be a top powerhouse who stands up and declares the Legion's terror and invincibility. Elune can't do it directly. All I have to deal with is a Duke Marcus and a few weak demigods. As long as I have 60% of my strength to enter this world, I will be absolutely invincible. Kil'jaeden made up his mind. No matter what, he shouldn't shrink back into the distorted void with his tail between his legs. Sargeras's failure was due to his carelessness. He had personally tried something as dangerous as soul possession. He really didn't know what to say about him. Archimonde was too reckless, and he finally bore the consequences under the suppression of the world. And he, Kil'jaeden, was the wisest and most suitable person to lead the Burning Legion. At the very least, he should be above Archimonde. Now, the chance to prove himself had come. Kil'jaeden gritted his teeth. He no longer used his hands to tear space apart. He began to stretch his head over. Only when his body truly entered this world could he better observe the flaws of this world and speed up the tearing of the space barrier. This wasn't an easy task. After all, he had to bypass the planet's Azeroth defense, forcefully find a flaw, and use the planet's energy to attract each other to open a new gap. In the command center, Vashj, who had settled everything, came to Duke's side. She became that obedient maid again. Master, are you so sure that Kil'jaeden will take the bait? Of course, because he's a gambler. Chapter 1524. Regardless of how Kil'jaeden was used to scheming and carrying out all kinds of sinister and cunning plans, he was actually similar to Duke in his bones. They both liked to win big with small. His small was to invest small. This way, once he succeeded, he would feel a greater sense of accomplishment in his heart. After all, after living for so long, it could be said that he had seen all kinds of storms. There were not many things that could arouse his interest. In fact, for a period of time, the reports from the Burning Legion's subordinates were all the same, making him a little numb. No matter what civilization, what race, the powerful military power of the Burning Legion could directly flatten them. No one could stop hundreds of millions of demons. Now, they suddenly encountered a hedgehog that not only blocked the Legion's steps, but also stabbed them until their hands were covered in blood, causing 2 of the 3 powerhouses to be temporarily disabled. This did not make Kil'jaeden feel ashamed or angry. Instead, it aroused his competitive spirit. So unknowingly, Kil'jaeden's gambling spirit became heavier. When Duke spoke with fervor and assurance, analyzing the details of Kil'jaeden's mentality perfectly, a charming smile appeared on Vashj's face. Sure enough, this is why I waited for 10,000 years and swore to serve the master of eternal life. Duke's face turned red. He was really afraid that he would not be able to control himself and have another maid who had nothing better to do. Cough cough, there was something important now. The Alliance's rapid elimination of the Sunwell's first and second boss posed a real problem for Kil'jaeden. This was like an iron lock across a river, making it difficult for him to advance or retreat. However, since Kil'jaeden had decided to go all out, he naturally had to make a choice. Kil'jaeden's voice came from the depths of the Sunwell's palace complex. Gemini, it's time to test you. The second portal is open. Lead all the low-level Void Lords and hold off the Alliance's powerhouses. As long as you can ensure that no enemies come to me in 20 minutes, you can immediately become high-level Void Lords again. The Eridar Gemini immediately shivered. Oh my god. This was a good thing that could not be encountered even once in 10,000 years. If it did not involve a top priority like the Azeroth portal, the probability of promotion in the Legion simply existed in theory. First, they had to be strong enough to meet the combat power requirements of the Lords. Then there were opportunities to deal with unimportant planets, Destroying 1,000,000 of them was no more than stepping on an ant in the eyes of the upper echelons. It was no big deal at all. Ever since the War of the Ancients, because they had chosen that damned Mark Dooku as a spy and the person in charge of opening the teleportation portal, they had been forced to the brink of death by Kil'jaeden. They had to do all the dirty and tiring work, and now they had to become combatants, forced to go to the front lines as cannon fodder. If they could receive such praise and promise from their old boss before they completely betrayed Kil'jaeden, they would probably be overjoyed. But there was no turning back now. Even if it was a dead end, he could only walk it to the end. Queen Saloras suddenly waved her hand. "Did you hear that? Lord Kil'jaeden has appointed Aurelius and me as the commanders of the Sunwell." Elises continued. "Now we must put enough pressure on the Alliance's experts, but we can't be too aggressive, lest we draw out the opponent's demigod." The eyeballs of the low-tier Void Lords almost popped out of their sockets. What was he supposed to do? Very soon, they understood that they were going to die one by one. And so, a funny scene appeared. For example, an Apocalypse Guard suddenly jumped out from a corner. "I'm Triple X." Before he could finish, the Alliance's experts attacked. Grom roared, "Eat my axe." Apocalypse Guards were originally more agile than Abyss Lords, but they were facing the ferocious Alliance's hero squad. Queen Sylvie's arrow, which had increased in power, nailed the Lord in an instant. As a result, Lord Howl's destructive power was on full display. That guy was instantly killed. Another Lord turned to ashes. Theon raised Ashbringer, which was as heavy as a door, and slashed down. Another burn. Magni, who was in his God's Descent state, swung the Balrog hammer. When the peak experts of the Alliance unleashed their strongest destructive power without any regard for their stamina and energy, the low-stage Void Dukes weren't enough at all. Every time they appeared, they would kill one in a second. In the end, no Void Lords were willing to obey orders. They all suggested, "We won't be able to stall for time like this." In fact, they were unwilling to die. After all, sacrificing oneself for the army was one thing, and sacrificing oneself for no reason was another. After all, even if they could be resurrected after death, their souls would still be weakened, and their strength would drop. "All right then. You will form the final line of defense with us, sisters." The Gemini could only give the order. Of course, they could use Kil'jaeden's name to force these Void Lords to die, but that would be too obvious. The sand in the hourglass of time continued to flow out. Kil'jaeden had requested 20 minutes, but only 5 minutes had passed. The Alliance's hero squad had already charged into the palace guarded by the Gemini. The huge palace door was rudely kicked open. The first thing that appeared in front of the Demon Lords was Lord Howl, who was holding an axe in his right hand and his left foot still in the air. It had to be said that with Lord Howl's domineering appearance, he really looked like a group of gangsters. "Welcome." Originally, Auras wanted to strike a charming pose and pretend that she knew nothing, and welcome the arrival of the Alliance's hero squad. Suddenly, be it the Eridar Gemini or the Demon Lords, they were all stunned. Just a moment ago, the news that came from outside was that a group of mortals from the Alliance had arrived. However, when the palace door was opened, what the demons saw was a powerful lineup that they had never seen before. The palace door was already very tall as a 3-story building. However, 2 giants that were as tall as the palace door strode in and guarded the 2 sides of the door. They clearly exuded a demigod aura that transcended the mortal world, and they clearly wore crowns that symbolized nobility on their heads. However, they stood on both sides like humble servants, bowing slightly as they welcomed the arrival of the main character. Similarly, there was a red-haired elf woman with a stronger demigod aura, but she wore a black and white lace-made uniform and followed closely behind the main character. What kind of existence could make 2 demigods of noble birth willingly become door guards? What kind of powerful person would make a demigod be a maid? There was only one answer. Azeroth Weave demigod Duke Marcus. No one in the army expected that the Alliance had already sent in their strongest forces without any warning. Without even greeting them, Duque raised his chin slightly and showed a contemptuous expression. "Clear away all this trash." Chapter 1525. How dare you? A mere native demigod dares to arc. Before the demonic guard could finish, a shadow flashed before his eyes, and the flash of the Emperor Kiraj's sword occupied his entire vision. Before Vashj, the sword Emperor, Emperor Vecnus, was as slow as a tortoise. But before this demonic guard's snail's speed, the tortoise's speed was so fast that it left an afterimage. Using all his muscles, the sword Emperor thrust the Emperor Kiraj's sword into the gap between the demonic lord's helmet and cheek. Then with a twist, the sharp greatsword pierced through the cheek, and the gap between the lower jaw and the skull into the brain. Just one strike was enough to inflict a fatal wound. Shivala, who was of the same race as Mother Shiraz, swung her 6 long blades at the demon Emperor Vecnus. In fact, all 6 of her blades hit their mark. No wonder she began to imagine the scene of the demon Emperor's body being torn apart, as if she could smell the stench of blood. In fact, what she saw was the scene of her body burning up, and smelled the burning scent of her own flesh. She was shocked by this unexpected scene, and her eyes widened, not knowing why there was such a shameless and mysterious effect like immunity to physical attacks. On the other side, Vashj was even sharper. The seemingly slow snake tail bow was shot out in an instant, and its speed was as fast as lightning. She chopped a demonic lord in the middle of the blade, while the opponent above used multiple arrows to maim another lord, while the opponent below used lightning magic to turn the third lord into charcoal. Finally, she used her snake tail to strangle the crippled one. She had taken care of 3 demonic lords by herself. The might of the number 1 demigod under Duque's command was on full display. By the time Theon Magni and Lord Howl had taken care of another, everyone was shocked to find that 6 of the 10 demonic lords in the palace were gone. Only the Eridar twins and 2 fell lords were left. The 2 Darksiders broke out in cold sweat. They had just agreed to cooperate with Gemini's operation, but who knew that when the other party smashed open the door, barged in, and started wantonly, Gemini did not move at all. What was going on? What was going on? They did not know what had happened. Only the Eridar twins knew that Duque had laid his cards on the table. Duque looked at them with a smile. There was only one meaning in his words. He wanted them to hand over their proof of allegiance. Betraying Kil'jaeden was not enough. They were even asked to publicly break off their relationship with the army. "Master, you're really," Auras said with a reproachful look. "How could we not do our best to carry out Master's orders?" Queen Salola's was extremely charming. The 2 demon lords beside them instinctively felt that something was wrong. Their reactions were not slow. Just as they turned around to face Gemini, they were already hit. "Oh, how dare you betray the army!" One of them was bathed in flames while the other was swallowed by a swamp of darkness. The natural difference in power and level made them defenseless in front of the 2 powerful demons, the Eridar twins. What's more, Gemini had descended with her true body. How could she be compared to them, who had invested less than half of their souls and relied solely on their bodies? Just before they died, they let out mournful cries. At this moment, Vashj dragged her snake tail and pulled the remaining demon lord in front of her. Vashj smiled like a flower. "Hey, did you see it clearly?" That guy hurriedly nodded. "If you saw it clearly, then tell everything that happened here to your master, Kil'jaeden. Now scram." After saying that, Vashj swung her snake tail. The huge demon lord rolled in the air at least 7 or 8 times before falling onto the ground in an extremely sorry state. When he got up, he did not dare to look at those pairs of mocking eyes. Like a stray dog that had fled with its tail between its legs, it ran towards the depths of the Sunwell in fear. On the other side, the Eridar twins slightly tidied up their originally very clean armor. They came in front of Duque and knelt down on both knees. "Great Master Duke Marcus, your most loyal slave." Eridar twins. Auras. Salola's. "Greetings, Master." Accompanied by a clear voice, the twins knelt down in unison. This scene made the leaders of the Alliance feel endless emotions in their hearts. Not long ago, the Burning Legion wantonly invaded Azeroth. From the first time the Dark Gate sent beastmen to invade, to the third battle of the Dark Gate, the Burning Legion's Nazul Scourge army, to the arrival of the Archerons, and then to the Outland to cause trouble. Every time, It was not the Legion that acted recklessly, high and mighty, appearing in front of the intelligent races of Azeroth with the expression of crushing ants. Now, it was completely the opposite. Although Duque had a long history of subduing foreign races, starting from the earliest weak chicken clans Murlocs and Nagas, up until now, Duque's great achievement of subduing subordinates of other races could only be described as explosively amazing. First, he once subdued the Windrunner family, including the current queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas. Then he subdued the entire Karaji insect people empire, which was led by 2 demigods and the twin emperors. Then he subdued the Naga tribe, which was led by the demigod Vashj, who dominated the central region of the Outland and caused the alliance to be unable to advance. And now he actually stepped on the face of the Burning Legion's commander, Kil'jaeden, and snatched over the 2 female adjutants that originally belonged to Kil'jaeden. No one knew how Duque did it. Other than admiration, everyone could only look up to him. The one who was most shaken was, of course, Imriel. As the archenemy of Eredar, the hatred between the Draenei and Eredar had long been so thick that it could not be dissolved. Although the teachings of the Holy Light had always taught them to be benevolent and forgiving, this did not include the Eredar tribe that had persecuted them in the past. Of course, she would not be foolish enough to hate these 2 rare traitors of Eredar. On the contrary, she began to understand why Master Valen asked her to actively get close to Duque, because only in Duque could she see the hope of defeating the Eredar tribe, and even the entire Burning Legion. Imriel's body and mind were trembling with excitement. There was an inexplicable desire in her heart. It was a desire to find a way to integrate into the alliance, into Duque's circle no matter what. Everything in the hall fell into silence, and the originally tense atmosphere of battle seemed to have disappeared without a trace. In front of Duque, there were only 2 powerful female evil demons meekly and quietly crawling on the ground. Duque's eyes were wide open. There seemed to be a purplish-blue vortex spinning clockwise in his pupils. He smiled and pressed his hands on the Gemini's forehead. The next moment, everyone felt that some unknown law of power was deviating. Chapter 1526. The evil aura left Gemini in fear. It was as if a new power was rising from the magic net and descending. Its powerful energy was forcefully pouring into Gemini's delicate body, dominating everything, taking over everything. Gemini was indeed Gemini. Even the sound and rhythm of their screams were the same. Everyone saw a lot of black fluid that looked like beads of sweat appearing on the graceful curves of Saloras and Aura's bodies. Not only that, faint wails of the undead squeezed out from their pores. Over the millennia, they had died in the hands of the Gemini twins, leaving behind soul fragments in their bodies. These soul echoes were filled with sorrow and resentment. Just listening to them for a while was enough to make one's hair stand on end. What shocked everyone even more was the next scene. Large and small blue magic arrays appeared on Gemini's joints, wrists, elbows, shoulders, ankles, knees, and cervical vertebrae. The mysterious runes on these magic arrays flowed in an incomprehensible manner, as if they were chaotic and irregular. The light produced by the magic arrays made Gemini's entire body bend backwards. Theoretically, it was painful, but their faces were flushed with pain and excitement. Theon was the first to notice. At first he thought it was an illusion, but as the magic runes flowed more and more intensely, not only him, but everyone else also saw that on the Gemini's chest, there was a flying claw connected to a pitch-black soul chain. The 5 sharp hooks on the flying claw emitted a demonic black light, and they were deeply hooked onto Gemini's heart. This discovery made Gemini's face turn green. What is this? Why didn't I know there was such a thing? The next second, when they saw Duque's confident smile, they inexplicably felt at ease. Mysterious and evil things were most terrifying when they didn't know what was going on, and knelt down inexplicably. After knowing it, it was usually the same thing. As expected, Duque's voice traveled into Gemini's ears. You should be glad that Kil'jaeden is busy opening the portal, and doesn't have the time to deal with you too. This saved me a lot of effort. Duque's index fingers trembled slightly, and Gemini suddenly heard a sound that sounded like a piano being played from a low note to a high note. Ding ding ding. As the pitch grew louder, the soul chains began to crumble bit by bit. Each chain let out a shrill roar before quickly turning into nothingness. The 5 hooks on the claw seemed to have been stimulated by something. They opened abruptly and then collapsed. The twins let out a long sigh of relief. For their new lives, and for making the right decision. There was even a gust of blue arcane energy gently wrapping around the damaged part of the soul that the hook had hooked out. In just a short 2 to 3 seconds, Gemini could already feel that the part had been perfectly repaired. Just as she was about to thank him, Gemini was shocked to find that the ball of energy had stopped moving. They immediately understood what Duque meant. Duque had never completely trusted them. This ball of energy was a guillotine hanging over their heads, constantly warning them that Kill Jaden could kill them in an instant, and so could Duque. However, Duque's behavior made them breathe a sigh of relief. Being on guard proved that Duque would still use them. Using them meant that they still had a chance to make contributions. They were not afraid of being on guard. They were afraid that after following Duque, they would be like an inconspicuous pebble on the side of the road, thrown aside and left to fend for themselves. This was what they were most afraid of. If Duque did not protect them, they were afraid that they would have to find a way to escape. Just as Nazul wanted to do at the beginning, they desperately escaped, trying to escape to a planet that had not been discovered by the army, hiding like a mouse, and struggling to survive. Duque used his supreme mysterious power to remove their shackles and add new ones. This made the Gemini feel as if they had been reborn. After the magic ceremony was completed, they bowed on the spot. Please hurry up, Master. We are afraid that Kill Jaden will speed up the process of breaking into Azeroth. Ha ha. Duque laughed. He laughed extremely happily. Yes, you guessed right. He has indeed sped up. Under normal circumstances, he would have completely entered Azeroth by now. Everyone noticed the words, under normal circumstances, that Duque had said, and everyone smiled knowingly at the same time. Let's go. Let's see what the last big shot of the Burning Legion looks like now. At this time, Duque finally pulled out his Demon Slayer Holy Sword. With his staff in his left hand and his sword in his right, he led everyone in the direction of the Sunwell. Glancing at the hesitant Eridar Gemini, Duque smiled. Wait for our triumphant return at the gate of the Sunwell Highlands. The Gemini were overjoyed and bowed deeply. They were strong, but they hated fighting, feeling that it was a kind of trouble. Moreover, if they had just defected to Duque, they would immediately have to face their old master on the battlefield. They really could not guarantee that if Kill Jaden went all out to kill them, Duque would not lend a helping hand. Now that Duque had exempted them from participating in the battle, it was of course like an amnesty. The team began to move forward. The mages in the team noticed that every time the tail of Duque's staff touched the floor, there would be a circle of magic ripples that could not be sensed by anyone except Pharaoh. Just like the sonar used by the Alliance Navy, it relied on the feedback of the magic ripples to grasp everything in the Sunwell. After everyone passed through gorgeous corridors and majestic palaces that were already empty of enemies, they finally reached the tallest and largest palace on the edge of the Sunwell. The palace gate opened, and Kill Jaden's angry voice came from inside. The terrifying sound wave was so loud that at the same time as the sound came out, it raised a cloud of dust, like a shock wave jumping out of the gate. Duque Marcus. After slightly blocking the dust in front of them, not only Duque, but every member of the team laughed. Why? Because they all saw Kill Jaden, who only had half of his body stuck at the portal gate, not going up nor down. Pfft. At this moment, Queen Sylvanas was completely relieved. Before arriving here, she had almost always kept a straight face. What if Kill Jaden did not fall for it? What if most of Kill Jaden's body had already entered Azeroth? Layers of melancholy had always been entangled in her heart like a nightmare. At this moment, of course, the clouds had dispersed and the sun had risen. As the host, Queen Sylvanas laughed, and the group of unscrupulous fellows in the Alliance naturally followed suit. For a moment, these mortal experts who were looked down upon by Kill Jaden burst into laughter. Chapter 1527. Oh my god. I thought my waist was already thick enough. I didn't expect there to be someone even thicker. Magni first patted his bucket-like waist and complained. Hey, did this Burning Legion commander crawl out of the sewers and get stuck because he miscalculated his waist? Jaina spat out her venomous tongue mercilessly. Kill Jaden. You better lose some weight. It was rare for Queen Sylvie to be so free, so she also joined in to ridicule the eggs. You should pass your butt over first, then I can stomp it hard on your butt. Magni loyally fulfilled his role as the main tank to taunt. Hey, are you sure you can reach his butt? Muradin retorted. Brother, you're dirty. With one of the alliance leaders taking the lead, the others of course would not let go of this opportunity to humiliate their mortal enemy. Instantly, they started chattering. Only Imriel was stunned. She finally saw the ultimate demon king who had persecuted and hunted the Draenei for 25,000 years. In fact, Kill Jaden's horrifying appearance was exactly the same as the one described by Professor Willen, and the three-dimensional model stored in the Draenei archives. His body was as huge as a hill. Even though he only had half of his huge body occupied more than half of the 100-meter diameter area in the middle of the hall. The only area left for mortals and Azeroth demigods to fight was a circular area less than 30 meters away from the pillars beside the hall. Kill Jaden's bright red skin was emitting magma-like heat all the time. Just a gentle flap of his pimpled bat wings could make a mortal feel a heat wave that was unbearable to mortals. His claws were huge. Just by looking at the size, it seemed like he could grab a medium-sized tank with one hand and use those sharp claws to crush everyone and everything inside. On his burly red shoulders were two extremely barbaric-style pauldrons. For huge curved horns pointed towards the sky. At the top of the pauldrons, there was something that looked like a brazier, burning with eternal flames. It was so hot that it was suffocating. The two iron chains on the pauldrons formed an X shape, tied to a belt with a huge skull at the bottom. Together with the other skull decorations on his body, he looked evil and terrifying. Amidst the scorching heat wave, there were faint wails of the dead. The souls of the creatures of various races that he had killed still could not rest in peace in this purgatory. If without the strange golden halo that was stuck at Kill Jaden's waist, the experts of the Alliance would probably be in awe when they saw his upper body, as if they were facing a great enemy. Now everything that killed Jaden had become a paper tiger. This was a different kind of irony. Ever since he had struck a deal with Sargeras to expel the Draenei into the Stellaris, Kill Jaden was convinced that no one could stop the power of the army. However, Sargeras had once made a promise of victory, and he had yet to fulfill it, which made him furious. However, none of his tricks could stop Duque from leading the Alliance or even the entire Azeroth to rise. Therefore, he decided to personally take care of all the ants, including Duque. However, he did not expect that all his tricks could not stop the powerhouses from coming at the most critical moment. What's more, he did not expect the biggest flaw to be beside him. It was the Eridar Gemini, whom he had once regarded as trash and was prepared to be used as cannon fodder. Faced with the enemy's trap and the mockery of the mortals, Kill Jaden was naturally angry, furious, and resentful. He could not wait to blow up Azeroth at the first moment. However, when all his emotions rose to the boiling point, Kill Jaden calmed down instead. His body was emitting heat that could melt stones and pillars, but his laughter was filled with coldness. No matter how the experts of the Alliance continued to mock him, Kill Jaden was not in a hurry. He did not make any moves either. He just stared at Duque and laughed coldly. That laughter made one's hair stand on end. If one did not have any skills, they might foolishly ask, "What are you laughing at?" That would be inferior in terms of aura, because it meant that one did not see through the other party's trump card. Ha 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 ha. Duque laughed too. Isn't it just a cold, fake, sneering, and pretending to laugh? I can do it too. At some point, only the laughter of Duque and Kill Jaden echoed in the entire hall. In the past thousands of years after the Well of the Sun was built, the King of the Sunstriders would lead all the High Elven nobles here to hold a grand banquet every major festival of Kuel Salis. The circular hall with a diameter of more than 200 meters, was supported by 36 marble pillars that seemed to have long reached the clouds. The entire vault above was painted with an unparalleled vault mural, which depicted the glorious history of the High Elves since their establishment for thousands of years. Of course, the focus was on praising the great Sunstrider royal family. However, none of the members of the Sunstrider royal family participated in the final battle that was about to happen, and would determine the future fate of Azeroth. This was quite ironic. Duque laughed impudently and comfortably, because he firmly believed that he had conquered the goddess of fate. Since even the goddess of fate was on his side, there was nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, not only was Duque laughing, but his eyes also had the penetrating feeling of seeing through the past and the future, as well as all the mysteries of the world. Eggs. Eggs. Do you know how many times I've farmed you? Do you know that I can count your skills by listening to the sound effects with my eyes closed? Do you know that later, even the gold group of the barbarians could farm you until your pants fell off? Don't let me be too disappointed, or you'll die. It was clearly Kil'jaeden who laughed first, but anyone could tell that Egg's laughter was becoming more and more fake and less confident. Finally, Kil'jaeden was the first to stop laughing. Duke Marcus, I admit that I underestimated you. Not just me, but the entire army underestimated you. You may have made a great name for yourself in this world, but today will be the end of your legend. Everything will end. With that, Kil'jaeden slowly raised his hands, and his claws, palms facing the sky, shook lightly as if he was playing a piano. Suddenly, a portal opened in all four directions of Kil'jaeden at the same time. Duque raised his chin slightly. He had already smelled that the gears of history had begun to shift. The size of these portals was much larger than the ones in history. Indeed, in the next moment, the Eredar warlocks that were supposed to be teleported out were the Lords of the Abyss. Accompanied by footsteps that were even more shocking than the galloping of horses, these terrifying monsters that were supposed to be the vanguard of the army brandished their huge blades and charged towards the alliance of heroes. Let us handle them. Magni was the first to take the lead. Chapter 1528. Even after activating God's Descent, Magni's body size was still the size of an adult and a child compared to an abyssal lord. The double-edged greatsword that was as large as a pillar collided with the small fire devil's hammer. The fire demon hammer, which was supposed to be smaller, should have been crushed, but the reality was that the Dwarf King's unreasonable strength had forced the Void Lord of the Abyss, which was at the level of a Void Lord, to take 3 big steps back. Immediately after that, Master Hal unreasonably leaped high into the air. With a swing of his axe, he instantly killed the Lord of the Abyss, who had used up his old strength and had yet to recover his strength. There was another Abyssal Lord that was being held off by Muradin Bronzebeard. On the other side, Theon was fighting an Abyssal Lord with Ashbringer, while the human heroes led by Varian were attacking the other 2 lords. Initially, the Alliance heroes seemed to have the upper hand, but after the second batch of Lord Demons came through the Void Portal, their combat power suddenly became a little tight. The Karaj twin emperors were the first to look bad. Of course, they knew that most of these Alliance heroes were the leaders of various countries. If any one of them died, Duque would probably be furious. However, in the Battle of the New Quicksand, even the middle-level leaders of the Karaj Empire had knelt down, so they could only come out to fight. The Sword Emperor waved his sword without hesitation, and the Demon Emperor continuously cast magic to support him. Kil'jaeden sneered. Suddenly, the 4 portals opened to 8. The guys that came out were still not too strong, only beginner Void Lords, but there were too many of them. There were now more than 10 Void Lords on the scene at the same time. Didn't you steal the control of the sun well, and use spatial magic to block me? Continue. Kil'jaeden looked at Duque casually. Duque and Kil'jaeden looked at each other and sneered. Do you think I have to do it myself if you send some trash? Although he said that, countless spatial spells and 3-dimensional geometric figures poured down from above on his retina. That's right. Duque had indeed blocked Kil'jaeden's waste using the secret plan that he had set up in the Sun Well. However, Kil'jaeden was not the kind of trash who would sit back and wait for death. As he spoke, he was also thinking of ways to continue to expand the spatial rift. Even if he couldn't expand the portal that was stuck, he could expand other rifts to allow more demon lords to enter Azeroth and force Duque to let go. At this time, Vashj was ready to go on stage. Suddenly, Duque gently waved his hand and stopped her. Duque snapped his fingers. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, the 36 huge marble pillars exploded at the same time. The roof of the huge palace, which covered a diameter of 200 meters, suddenly split open like a chrysanthemum in full bloom. Pieces of the triangular roof of the palace slid out and fell outside with a loud rumbling sound. When the magnificent ceiling of the palace was dismantled along with the rather historical mural, a pitch-black and deep sky was revealed. Unknowingly, it was already night. Stars twinkled in the sky. In the next moment, Kil'jaeden's face turned a little green. Beside Duque, Tyron stood gracefully and slowly raised her fair arms that had a light purple tint to them like jade. Starfall. A meteor shower fell from the night sky. The meteorite fragments that fell from the void battlefield immediately affected the small battlefield in the sun well. Even Kil'jaeden could not help but raise his huge head to look at these uninvited guests who had suddenly barged into the sky. The fragments of the stars first flashed in the void, like the lights of civilization in the night. Every time the silver light flashed, a fragment of the stars would seem to jump through space, crossing space from the far end of the universe to the sky above the sun well. A vast expanse of specks of light appeared in the sky. Each speck of light represented a terrifying power that could destroy the heavens and the earth. The battlefield in the Sunwell Palace was silent for a moment. Countless rays of silver light extended from the flashes in the air. These dazzling lights pulled out rays that were thicker than pillars and smashed towards the Void Lords one by one. Regardless of whether they were the Abyss Lords with their huge bodies and powerful defense, the mysterious and cunning Shivala, or the famous Dreadlord, none of them could dodge these terrifying attacks that surpassed the realm of gods. The light of the starfall engulfed every demon lord present, but did not touch any mortal heroes. The result was immediately revealed. Under the power of the starfall, the demon lords that should have extremely high resistance to magic and physical attacks were torn apart. They did not even have the time to let out their last wail before they died. Even though all the lords were dead and their corpses were completely shattered, the light of the stars did not disappear. Under Tyron's guidance, they were like cheetahs looking for their prey, quickly flying towards their final target. One after another, the falling stars bombarded the teleportation door that Kil'jaeden had opened without stopping. Far away in the void distortion, the Eridar mages who were responsible for stabilizing the teleportation door all vomited blood. They could no longer control it, and could only let the large teleportation door collapse before their eyes. This time, Kil'jaeden was clearly at a disadvantage. Unable to hold it in any longer, Kil'jaeden made his move. His first move was an extremely exaggerated multicast. Woo! It was like the wail of a soul from the deepest depths of hell. It was the lingering sound of death and ashes left behind by the army's iron hooves. It would have been fine if Kil'jaeden had used some soul whip at the start, but no one expected the egg to go all out and use darkness of 1,000 souls. Originally, it was the night sky around them, illuminated by the brilliant lights in the palace. Now, everyone felt that the entire world had suddenly turned dark. Everything in his field of vision instantly turned a dull gray color. It was a terrifying color that was depressing to the point of being oppressive. It was more like Kil'jaeden was venting his anger. Duque took a deep breath. He knew that he could not panic. Khadgar, I'll leave the spatial shackles to you. Duque ordered calmly in the spiritual world. Leave it to me. Khadgar bowed and immediately took over the control of the spatial shackles. Duque clasped his hands together and glanced in the direction he had come from. After silently cursing Kalegos for being a bastard, he had no choice but to do it himself. Originally, Kalegos would provide the Blue Dragon Pearl, which could summon 2 young blue dragons to protect the mortals and provide all sorts of benefits. It was obvious that Kalegos had wasted time with Madagosa, or perhaps he had used a big move at the beginning of the egg, which was beyond his expectations. In any case, he was not here, so Duque could only rely on himself. Faced with the egg's ultimate move that could instantly kill people, Duque shouted, "Be careful of the darkness of 1,000 souls. Gather everyone into the barrier." With that, Duque used his divine power to raise 4 hemispherical arcane barriers that were at least 10 meters in diameter. Chapter 1529. In this life, there were finally Azeroth people who faced the terrifying impact of Kil'jaeden's sea of shadow energy. At that moment, the power of darkness and undead became thousands of times more active, and countless vengeful spirits appeared in the air. The evil spirit tide instantly took shape and came from all directions, swarming towards Kil'jaeden, who had summoned them. They didn't know that they would become nourishment for Kil'jaeden's big move, but they instinctively obeyed the call from the spiritual world, as if subjects responding to the call of their king and sacrificing everything for it. On the outskirts of the Sunwell Highlands, many ordinary Alliance soldiers suffered. The most ridiculous ones were directly transformed into monsters by the distorted shadow magic. Their human souls were instantly obliterated, and all that was left was a boundless hatred for the living and the holy light. This caused chaos in the Alliance's frontline army. However, the Shadowblade elves who were defending around the Sunwell Highlands were even more affected. Countless defenseless half-elves and half-demons were like moths attracted to a flame, and they were immediately eroded by the unhindered influx of shadow magic. This was a very cold joke. If there were too many moths and the flame was too weak, it would really extinguish the flame. These half-baked demons couldn't withstand the soul power that was hundreds of times more than what they could bear. A black flame ignited all over their bodies, and they turned into ashes amidst their screams and wails. Then their souls were sucked away by Kil'jaeden. These mage elves tried to obtain power and status, but they were treated as nourishment, mercilessly harvested and absorbed. It had to be said that this was quite ironic. Their fate was even more miserable than the High Elves who surrendered to Sargeras 10,000 years ago. Of course, no one would pity them. At this moment, there were scenes of buildings collapsing and lives disappearing everywhere. Even Duque's magic net began to be eroded and rebuilt. It looked like the curtain call of an era. Dark shadows swept across the entire Isle of Quel'Danas, and the shadow magic that spread from Kil'jaeden had the momentum to erode the entire island, and even the whole world. Originally, he just wanted to withstand this move like in history and slowly consume Kil'jaeden. At this moment, Duque was a little angry. It seems that I've been completely underestimated by you. Do you really think that I didn't do anything after becoming a demigod? Duque gently raised his hand. Looking down from the sky, the soul ocean created by 1,000 soul darkness looked like a wave of darkness. But in the blink of an eye, arcane energy lines suddenly appeared in the sky above the Sunwell Highlands. These energy lines extended from the nodes of the weave in the void, forming new energy nodes where they intersected. Then countless beams of light descended from the nodes and poured into the black waves. A bright flame ignited in an instant. It was like a huge ring of fire, preventing the tide of darkness from spreading in all directions, and preventing more vengeful souls from stepping into the highlands of the Well of the Sun. In fact, it also prohibited the possibility of Kil'jaeden borrowing power from the outside world. Duque waved his hand. Come. Since you think that you can defeat me, Elun, and Azeroth on our home ground with your own strength, then you will be able to defeat me. In that case, don't even think about absorbing energy from the Azeroth. If you can defeat us with your own strength, then we'll consider it our loss. Duque shamelessly made the announcement. Who was the shameless one who blocked the egg so that only half of its body could enter? If you have the ability, let the egg descend in its full form, and then fight to your heart's content. Kil'jaeden couldn't hold it in anymore, and directly smashed a dark light ball over. A huge amount of shadow energy beyond the imagination of mortals gathered into a small beam of light. When it blasted out of Kil'jaeden's right claw, the Alliance's powerhouses even thought that the egg had stabbed out with a sword, not an explosion. The opponent was changing, and so was Duque. Everyone suddenly realized that the energy shield covering everyone's heads had more frost elements than arcane spells. and the area in front of them had turned into a sharp cone with dozens of edges. Bzzz. It was a sharp impact sound. Mortals were completely helpless in the face of this shocking, extraordinary power. Even a bold dwarf king like Magni Bronzebeard could only futilely take out a large shield in front of him. This action was more like a habit, a form of formality. If even Duke's shield couldn't withstand Kil'jaeden's ultimate move, then all he could do was die before his comrades died. Heaven to the left, and the warriors to the right. As a tank who attracted the vitality of the team, and obtained the divine artifact that countless damage output professions dreamed of, it was even more of a responsibility to stand at the front of the team. At this moment, Magni was prepared to die first if he couldn't do it. However, a familiar hand rested on his shoulder. Relax, when have I ever let you down? Hearing Duke's words, Magni suddenly felt less nervous. A moment ago, he was as hard as a rock, but he lacked tension and tenacity. If an enemy stronger than him attacked, he would definitely collapse. Magni felt inexplicably at ease, but also a little ashamed. I still rely too much on Duke. Suddenly, Magni had a faint desire in his heart. If only I was a demigod too. Of course, Duke didn't know that his words of comfort had unintentionally accelerated the growth of this dwarf hero, who had also become a demigod in the original history, and unintentionally changed history. All of Duke's attention was focused on the battle with Kil'jaeden. The lingering evil spirits began to disappear from the palace in the sun well as the darkness of 1,000 souls was used up. Kil'jaeden's multicasting had just begun. From his right claw, a dazzling cluster of lightning was forming. When the sky and earth darkened just now, what gathered was not only the negative energy of the vengeful spirits, but also the fiercest lightning in the world. Legion lightning. It could be said that the chain lightning that the bull-headed shaman was using now were all inferior versions of Legion lightning. As early as 30,000 years ago, the Eridar warlocks had already reached the peak of the use of elements. Almost as soon as Duke's elemental shield disappeared after it clashed with the darkness of 1,000 souls, Legion lightning arrived. A powerful electric current that could vaporize an entire palace hit Magni's chest, charring it instantly. Magni suddenly remembered what his father had taught him back then. That was the face of a cold master teaching a foolish disciple. Magic immunity? There has never been true magic immunity in the world. All magic immunity only applies to enemies of the same level or lower. Remember, a low-level mystery will definitely be destroyed by a higher-level mystery. He didn't know this before, but now he deeply experienced it. Chapter 1530. That was the difference between heaven and earth. That was the difference between a mortal and a divine realm. For some reason, at this moment, Magni thought of the lightning rod and the earth that absorbed all the lightning. Lightning rod. Another miracle-level precious knowledge that Duke had taught the dwarves after his invention. Almost all the flying warship factories on the high mountains had lightning rods that could protect them from lightning strikes. Although the lightning in the sky had allowed the dwarves of the Eagle Nest Mountain to practice, Thunderhammer, Kil'jaeden's Lightning Legion gave Magni a different experience. Magni was clearly focused on defense, but that feeling as if he had caught onto something attracted Duke's attention. Duke was startled, and then he smiled and curled his lips. Vashj immediately understood. As a maid and a Naga who had been learning to read people's minds for the past 10,000 years, Vashj was far ahead of Duke's harem in terms of understanding other people's thoughts. With a signal from Duke, she made her move. One of the palms flipped, and the Lightning Legion, that was supposed to jump to the next person and continue to deal damage to the Alliance's Beyonders, suddenly became tamed because of Vashj's sudden attack. The lightning that contained strong natural elements became a harmless earthworm in Vashj's palm. Vashj not only subdued this lightning, but also personally demonstrated how to use the elements around her to remove the energy that was not under her control. This time, it was Magni's turn to be startled. Then he smiled brightly. He knew that Duke was not stingy in showing his old friend how to cross the boundary of the divine realm. After playing with the lightning, Vash threw the lightning snake out again, blasting it into Kill Jaden's newly opened teleportation portal. The space in the Sunwell had long become unstable after the continuous work of Kill Jaden and the demons. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was riddled with holes. It was a little difficult to suddenly open a large teleportation portal that could allow Void Lords to enter, but they could open as many small and medium-sized teleportation portals as they wanted. Flame Stinger. With just a thought from Kill Jaden, in the void, a highly concentrated flame gathered together at a high speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye, then turned into the shape of a spear, and fiercely stabbed towards Duque. Duque waved the staff in his left hand, and an ice blade as smooth as a mirror suddenly appeared out of thin air, slashing towards the flaming spike. From the perspective of the Demon King Vec, Lore on the right of Duque, the ice blade just happened to be balanced with his field of vision. The flat and thin blade seemed to have become a thin thread. This thread seemed to have easily cut off Kill Jaden's flame thorn. And then the ice blade was blown into pieces by the fire elements that broke through the air, scattering in the air. It was a beautiful scene. Behind the seemingly simple confrontation was the extraordinary control of the elements of the two peerless masters. There were no tricks to speak of, only absolute control. As long as one side was slightly weaker, they would be killed by the continuous magic attacks. Pfft. Kill Jaden spat on the ground, his anger growing. In terms of elemental manipulation, he was, of course, superior to Duque. It was just that Duque's technique was not as good as his, and once he couldn't handle it, he would use force to break through, using the energy of the weave to force his way through. This was not the most infuriating thing. In just a few rounds of fighting, Kill Jaden suddenly discovered that Duque could imitate, study, and absorb his elemental manipulation techniques. What the hell, he could even learn and apply it. Unfortunately, half of his strength was forcefully blocked, and he could not use it. This was like an idiot forcefully dragging him to the same level of intelligence as the idiot, and then using his exquisite combo to beat him up with incomparable familiarity. There was no need to mention how sullen it was. Kill Jaden suddenly regretted throwing his first, Darkness of 1,000 Souls, too early. If he had more time to accumulate power and collect vengeful souls, the power of Darkness of 1,000 Souls would be even greater and more terrifying. However, don't think that you can let your guard down just because Kill Jaden had those skills. Immediately, Kill Jaden returned the favor to Duque. In the next 30 seconds, Vashj and the Karaj twin emperors destroyed the portal, while Kill Jaden threw small skills such as Flame Spike, Flame Flower, and Shadow Stinger to contend with Duque, while fiercely resisting the operation of the spatial shackles. Just when Duque thought that everything was as it was in history, an unforeseen event suddenly occurred. A large portal the size of half of Kill Jaden's body opened behind him without any warning. It was not that Duque did not want to stop it, but Kill Jaden suddenly spread the huge bat wings on his back, and forcibly took Duque's holy light flame burst full of holy light, covering the opening of the portal. 3 seconds later, a 6-armed Shivala appeared, wielding 6 evil weapons that emanated a strong, ominous light. Duque's eyes immediately narrowed, because the system had already notified him. Doomsayer Darien has entered the battlefield. Darien was one of the most evil and warlike warriors in the Burning Legion. In the original history, she should have been captured and imprisoned by the Nara long ago, so why did she appear here? And now was not the time for her to appear in history. Humph! Duque snorted coldly. Suddenly, a huge arcane hand appeared in the void, fiercely grabbing the portal that Darien had come out from and destroying it. Kill Jaden did not think much of it, and instead, a cruel smile appeared on his face. Duque knew this swindler's new idea. With only half of his strength to fight with Duque, Kill Jaden would eventually be exhausted to death. After all, he could not be like Duque, constantly replenishing the magic power sent into the magic net from all over Azeroth. But it was unrealistic for Duque to rely on Khadgar alone to lock down the entire space. Khadgar's abilities were not bad, and it had already taken a lot of effort for him to lock down Kill Jaden's waist. Spatial strangulation, blockades, and breakthroughs were happening all the time. This was like a long and drawn-out hacker war. Both sides used different methods to attack and defend against each other's attacks. Some were passive, some were active. If Khadgar had to lock down Kil'jaeden while also taking care of the other large portals, it would be too much. Kil'jaeden was also forcing Duque to divert some of his attention to suppress his large portals. Otherwise, he would have to continuously send in high-level Void Dukes and suppress Duque's side in terms of the number and quality of his subordinates. At this moment, Darien, who had just come out, was fighting with the Sword Emperor. In a short period of time, the Sword Emperor would not be able to free up his hands. The bad news was that the second, third, and fourth high-level portals were also forming. Duque's expression froze. What the heck? This is a competition. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.